Greetings. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. Today is Monday. The color is purple, and the planet that represents Monday and purple is Yesod, also represented by the color silver. Today's study will be on the chapter 15 in A Practical Guide to Kabbalistic Symbolism by Gareth Knight, the chapter on Yesod. So, if you are someone of comprehensive occult understanding, you'll understand that all 10 plus 1 of the spheres of the Holy Kabbalah are divine and way of equal importance because the tree in itself is the whole, it is the all. No one aspect of it means more or less. In other words, Malkuth is just as divine as Kether. Yesod is just as divine as Binah. And what we'll find is that all of the essences of force and form collect, unite, and are dispersed in the sphere of Yesod. And we'll see what that means and why that's important. Everyone's heard of the astral plane, and everyone wants to get to the astral plane. But what people don't understand is the only way to understand the astral plane is to have a comprehensive understanding of the etheric plane. Now, you can access the astral plane, but specifically I said in order to understand the astral, you have to understand the etheric. Why? Because first grade comes before second grade, which comes before third grade. It's literally useless to go to sixth grade if you don't have a first grade education. It can be done, but it's going to be more difficult than it needs to be. Likewise, you may be someone who has heard of the astral plane, but have not been able to have consistent results. Well, the reason may be because you've completely ignored the previous grade. So we're going to touch on that. Yesod represents that previous grade. Let's begin. Greetings, greetings. Ra, peace, stuffed dog. Greetings, bro, right at the beginning. Al Dickey, good evening, my friend. Kevros, SS God, peace, peace. Sanaya Stewart, good evening, hope you're doing well. Matthew Watson, greetings, brother, greetings. Will Trent, peace, peace. All aboard, all aboard. Awesome, y'all. So let's get started. If you haven't already, go ahead and smash the like button because YouTube organizes and sorts its content based on, engagement. So engagement is counted by likes and comments and everything else. So I'd appreciate if you did that. I appreciate you even if you don't, because honestly, gratitude has nothing to do with the external and everything to do with the essence of a thing. It's kind of like being in a relationship, right? If you have a partner who only appreciates you when you make them feel good, or maybe the partner only appreciates how you look or your body or what you do for them, that's not really, I mean, it is a level of gratitude for sure, but true love, true gratitude goes beyond the surface level external activities and behavior, right? True gratitude and true love is being able to see the essence that is behind the expression. So what's behind the face? What's behind the body? What's behind what they do for you? What's behind what they say? Right? Do you love that? So in any case, I'm grateful for you. Let's go. Peace, Nuru. Peace, Society Ejects. Stack of books. Who loves orange soda? Peace and greetings from across the pond. All right, getting right to it. After, of course, I organized the stack. Check that out. Real Dads Read. Right? If you guys are lucky enough to grab a copy of this book, it starts to become really useful the more that I'm studying the mythology. As we talked about in class, I never thought to research this particular entity. Hopefully I'll find his page. I think it's further in the back. Come on. There he is. You know, it never dawned on me to do some research to find out who exactly this was. But when I did, holy cow, really transformed how I see the soul, right? And a lot of these sayings that people say, oh, we're all one and everyone is God, we all have God inside of us. Well, it really transformed my understanding of that because, yeah, a lot of the mystery of this science is in plain sight, for sure. But I was only able to come to that conclusion with the help of this book here. So I'm happy that I was able to snag it at least. Some of you may know. All right, let's go. Doing more research into the Atman and Brahman and Purusha and what consciousness actually means. What are they talking about when they say those words? Sunshine Chick, peace, good evening. Meta Netta, peace, welcome. Alicia M, greetings. Matthew Watson says, I got that book $40 on Prime, so it's out there. Awesome, bro. Awesome. I'm happy for you. I don't even remember how much I paid for mine. Technical difficulties already.
Hey TK, can you keep an eye out for a little black Delta 8 bar about yay big?
What's a Delta 8 bar?
It's like like a little pop bar. Vape.
Oh, yeah.
Keep an eye out, because mine is just poofita, and I don't know if I dropped it on the way in, but I can't find it in my car, or... So if you see it, that was mine.
Sure, and you said it's black?
Yeah. Bam.
No problem. All right. The soul has a name. And when you learn that name, you start thinking about thoughts you haven't thought before. Okay, guys. Let's keep it moving. So, here we are on the Tree of Life, Yesod. Which is the ninth sphere, directly above Malkuth. And let's begin. Chapter 15, Yesod, the Foundation. The ninth path is called the pure intelligence because it purifies the emanations. It proves and corrects the designing of their representations and disposes the unity with which they are designed without diminution or division. These Yetziradic text quotes start to make more sense the further that we go into this. Because as I said, if you look exactly at where Yesod is stationed on the tree, notice how everything comes downward and is filtered through here to get to here. So in other words, the ninth path is the pure intelligence. Why? Because it purifies the emanations. As the previous 8 emanations flow through this point, the work of Yesod is to purify those emanations, to purify them. And it says it proves and corrects the designing of their representations. It proves and corrects the designing of the representations. We're talking about the form. We're talking about creating forms, or rather the gathering of forms to represent specific forces. And in order for this process to work, those forms have to be well-rounded. And I don't mean shape-wise. I mean the correspondence, what we know as correspondences. They have to check out. They have to check out across the board. So when you think of a hawk, there's quite a few things that it represents. No matter what culture we go to, we're going to see a lot of similarities behind that symbol. So what we're talking about here is proving and correcting the designing of representations. This isn't done necessarily by an overarching judge somewhere. We are dealing with the collective unconscious. So the more that everyone has a specific correspondence or link with a specific symbol, that begins the purifying and correcting process. Because as we know, symbols can change their meaning over time, depending on the culture, right? A lot of the spirits that are listed in the Goetic 72 actually used to be gods and goddesses worshipped in their own time. But as we see, things have changed, and now they've been relegated to a new system. So that the forces that the Goetic spirits represent, their meanings have changed due to the culture. However, if one is able to really tap into the layers of that particular spirit, you will start to tap into the previous data that was associated with it before it became a Goetic spirit. Does that make sense? Thank you, Society Ejects. Society Ejects says 9, Yesod. Angels, archangels, Gabriel, and the angelic group is the Ashim. Useless Familiar, peace. ZJ, peace. Okay, so the magical image is a beautiful naked man, very strong. According to Ladder of Lights, that very strong part we could easily see dealing with a specific bodily organ, defying gravity. And the reason being because this is also the place where it says the representations and the designing of their forms are perfected. Well, this is also where you get the human body. This is also where you get any archetype for whatever form will be taken once manifestation happens. But we'll get to that. God name Shaddai El Chai. Archangel Gabriel. The order of angels, cherubim, the strong. So you'll notice here another difference. Previously we came across the difference between Michael and Gabriel from this book to this book. Well, now you see there's a difference between the angelic order, right? In this book, he relates the cherubim to this point. But in Ladder of Lights, he relates the cherubim to Malkuth. And so we'll see that switch here. There's a switch between the angelic orders here and a switch between the archangels here. I wonder what else there is to that. All right. So the virtue is independence. The mundane chakra is the moon. The title is the Treasure House of Images. And that served to be very important because we also see a very similar aspect in the Vedic information. Chitta as the storehouse of images. But here we see the treasure house of images. Definitely not a mistake or an accident or a coincidence. Spiritual experience, the vision of the machinery of the universe. I call it the etheric plane. The absolute color is indigo. Briatic color is violet. Yetziratic color, very dark purple. Asiatic color, citrine, flecked azure. The vice is idleness. Symbols, perfumes, and sandals. Naturally natured, peace, peace and clarity, peace, love, and clarity. Moby, welcome, welcome, good evening. Just getting started. Okay, so Yesod is the Sephirah of the etheric plane, and so not only is it the powerhouse or machinery of the physical world, It also holds the framework in which the particles of dense matter are enmeshed. The study of the etheric is a vast one, for it is coextensive with the whole range of the physical sciences, but its effect in the physical world can be regarded approximately as vitality. Vitality is the effect in the physical plane of the etheric plane. Pranamaya kosha, pranic body, prana. It is an energy of integration which coordinates the physical molecules, cells, and so on into a definite organism. And so without it, our physical bodies would be nothing but collections of independent cells. It is not a product of physical life, for Yesod is nearer to the source of things than Malkuth. But living creatures, plants, and even minerals are its products. And even as a lack of it in the nervous system would lead to exhaustion and death, so an overplus of it would cause disease and subsequently death. 3. It is the controlling agent in the chemical physiological changes of protoplasm and shows its presence by the power of organisms to respond to stimuli, and is thus the basis behind those fibrous cells which constitute the nerves and give the power to feel pleasure and pain. It is held by esoteric science that it is the etheric vehicle and not the physical body which has the power to feel. And this is the principle behind certain anesthetics. They drive the etheric double out of the physical body, as occurs in sleep, deep trance, and finally at death. The physical body is the receiver of physical sense impressions only, and has no acute sensory awareness except as vague, dull, diffused feelings, such as general fatigue. The formation of a nervous system is caused by an admixture of astral with etheric force, and so there is only a rudimentary nervous structure in plants and none at all in minerals. All, however, have their structure built and held by the etheric web or network. Thus, it is the foundation of physical existence, and the foundation is the title of Yesod. Makes me think of the scientific tree of life, where they've got all the different animals evolve from one thing to another. You got the fungi kingdom and the single-celled organisms and the vertebrates and the mammals and the reptiles and all that stuff. It makes me wonder if the original notion behind evolution was actually etheric in its connection as opposed to purely genetic. Because if we look at the Kabbalion and the 7 Hermetic principles, and we look at the scale of consciousness and how it basically starts at the mineral level, then the plant level, then the animal level, then the God level, etc. Well, the only difference between, well, not the only difference, but the main difference between those levels is how intricate the etheric body would be. Like he said here, it's pretty much non-existent in in a mineral, but then we begin to see its formations in a plant, and then we see it evolving even more in animals with a backbone, basically. So I wondered, what is the difference between the etheric body of a human and that of, say, an archangel? Andrea Sanders says, so Yesod is the nervous system. Well, what he's saying here is that the representation of a complex nervous system shows that there is a strong etheric structure there, a strong etheric presence. So I would not say that Yesod is the nervous system. I would say that a complex nervous system represents a complex etheric body, and a simple nervous system represents a simple etheric body. So we're talking about this concept of different bodies that exist in different dimensions. You're a multidimensional being. You exist on different planes at the same time. So on the physical plane, you have a physical body. On the etheric plane, which is represented as Yesod, you have an etheric body. Likewise, in this area here between Hod and Netzach, the lower astral, you've got an astral body. Of course, in the mental plane, a mental body, and in the causal world, you have a causal body. And what that causal body is reintegration with this entity that's behind the tree that you see here, which is the soul. But until our awareness of self expands to that level, we only see ourselves as part of this machine instead of the machine as a whole. So most people only have an awareness of the physical body. And just like, think about that. So just like a rock doesn't have much of an etheric body, and as a result, it doesn't have a complex nervous system, plants have a little bit more, animals have a little bit more. So notice, many people only have an awareness of their physical body. Now, as we get more into the spiritual work, we start gaining more of an awareness of our etheric body. We begin to expand and realize new capabilities of our awareness. Capabilities that didn't exist when we were purely focused on the physical. Now, this process continues because after you begin to become really comfortable with the etheric, you start expanding into what I call the lower astral. And those options of what is possible begin to expand even more. So just like the difference between a rock and a plant and a human, this is what you'll be experiencing as you expand from physical to etheric to astral awareness. So it isn't something that just happens in a dream. It isn't like you just have a cool dream and that's astral projecting. Your awareness of how reality works begins to shift, right? So it's not just having a cool astral projection dream. Your understanding of reality begins to change. And it's not merely an intellectual understanding. It's an experiential understanding. Because the more that you start working and dealing in these higher levels, how you thought the world functions begins to change. So therefore, you begin to behave differently. Your entire life begins to shift. So it's a definite sign that you're doing this work when things around you begin to change. It's not just about collecting books and words. These words begin to take root and grow fruit. Excellent question, Andrea Sanders. Thank you. Jenny, peace. Great to see you. Straight Panther, good evening, my brother. Good evening. Glad you're here. Okay, so Society Ejects wrote Pranamaya Kosha in the chat. I guess it would have been nice if I brought my eraser. Maybe I could use my shirt. Oh, I had to stop doing that in 3rd grade, right? Alright, so instead of drawing that chart, I'm just going to show you in Taught with Shooty where it is. So we've got chapter 10, Tattvas and Koshas, page 72. And on page 72, I'm just going to go over this briefly. She mentions the Koshas, which are the 5 bodies. What she says here is the different levels of existence in which the 5 tattvas or mahabhutas manifest are known as koshas in yoga. Kosha literally means sheath or covering, and in this context refers to the different layers covering the inner essence of man, that is the spirit or pure consciousness, Purusha. Man is said to be, or Atman, man is said to be enveloped in 5 such koshas, each more subtle in vibration than the preceding one, and each related to a particular level of awareness and experience, right? So I'm not making this stuff up. She said this too. The first and grossest covering is Annamaya Kosha, the sheath made of food. We know that is the physical body. Next is Pranamaya Kosha, the sheath made of prana. That's the etheric body. And that's what we're talking about here. He said the big sign of what happens when the etheric and the physical come together is vitality. We've heard of being energized as working with more prana. So that whole plane is called the Pranamaya Kosha, the sheath made of prana. Now after that, we start getting into what we know in the West as the astral plane and the mental plane. But how she split it up is the Manomaya Kosha, the sheath made of mind and thought. Okay, and that has more to do with the ego, the Antakarana, the ego. I guess we could say Manas for the Annamaya Kosha, Chitta for the Pranamaya Kosha, Ahamkara for the Manomaya Kosha, and then finally Buddhi for Vijnanamaya Kosha. And she says Vijnanamaya Kosha is the sheath made of intuition. And then lastly, Anandamaya Kosha, the sheath composed of bliss, which would be the soul. And then she goes on to explain a little bit more about it, how Anamaya Kosha is related to the conscious mind and physical body. Manamaya Kosha is related to the subconscious mind and the subtle body. Pranamaya Kosha is the link between those two, relating to both states of mind and body. Cool. If you don't have this book, you definitely should. Especially if you're new here. It's an easy way to kind of catch up on the stuff that we talk about. Pablo X69, peace. Okay, so we're talking about the formation of a nervous system is caused by an admixture of astral with etheric force. All right, so that would answer your question right there. The formation of a nervous system is caused by an admixture of astral with etheric force. And so there's only rudimentary nervous structure in plants and none at all in minerals. Another visual is in this book, Awakening the Life Force, which again, if you're able to grab a hold of it, you'd be blessed. So here's another aspect of looking at these bodies, right? So we got the physical body, the gross body, which is very dense and very expressed, very evolved. You know, everything is very detailed. But within that are the subtle bodies, are the ones that I just named. So we got the Pranamaya Kosha, the Manamaya Kosha, the Vijnanamaya Kosha, and then the Anandamaya Kosha. So it can be best thought of as the physical body being a part of the physical plane in its entirety. So everything that you see with your eyes, that's all the physical body, the physical plane. And your physical body is a part of that. Likewise, as we're exploring now the etheric plane or the prana plane, you've got a pranic body which is composed of prana. It's a part of that whole world. Now also on the astral plane, the same thing is happening. You've got an astral body existing there, just like you've got an etheric body and a physical body, but it's composed of the astral plane. So you're only going to see it on the astral plane. It's not going to be floating around in the physical plane. But it has an effect on the etheric, which has an effect on the physical. So these things can work somewhat independently. And then, of course, it goes on to the mental plane and then the actual soul itself, the causal body, as you can see here. All right, I hope that's clear because we are now moving forward. Sunshine Chick, were you ever able to find the Starlight? This stuff is so delicious. A little too delicious. That's why I only got the baby-sized cans. All right. In this way, Yesod can be said to hold the image of everything that exists in the physical world. And thus, it is the storehouse of images. Makes sense. All, however, have their structure built and held by the etheric web or network. Thus, it is the foundation of physical existence, and the foundation is the title of Yesod. So in this way, Yesod can be said to hold the image of everything that exists in the physical world, and thus, it is the storehouse of images. Keep that in your head. If nothing else that you remember about Yesod, understand that it's called the storehouse of images. That's its code name. Society Eject says, quick question, Travis. Yes, sir. And yet, it not only contains these images, it has the power of altering them. And it is by means of this fact that the yogi, for example, can produce changes within the physical organism by means of the meditation and postural techniques of Hatha Yoga. This particular aspect of Yesod is that which is stressed in the Etheric text. The ninth path is called the pure intelligence because it purifies the emanations. It proves, in other words, it tests and corrects the designing of their representations, which results, of course, in functional forms in the physical world. Malkuth. Heavy stuff. Please grab hold of it. Because doesn't it just make sense? He says that everything has their structure built and held by the etheric web, right? By the etheric network. I've talked about this for a long time. I really have. Especially if you check those main 3 videos I have on my page with episode 1, 2, and 3. That whole series was about the etheric plane for a reason. Like he just said in this paragraph, this is the storehouse of images, right? In other words, it contains the etheric web or the network that's the foundation of physical existence. So if one were to concentrate on this area, on that aspect of reality, one has the very real possibility of manipulating and changing those forms, and thereby changing the forces that they are represented by. So this is where magic takes place, in the etheric plane, right? So it's not simply just daydreaming. It's using the imagination in a constructive, purposeful way. And then, of course, you see that it works when the change is produced. Now, there's ways to kind of guess at it and try, and there's ways to do it with certainty. Society Ejects asks, when we make the transition, are we jumping through the 5 koshas and trying to stay in the Anandamaya kosha? So, mainly in the Pranamaya kosha, this is where all the memory and all the karma is stored, and for the most part, it's an extreme amount of karma. So until one of 2 things happens, we don't really go past that point. And those one of 2 things are if someone were to completely neutralize their karma while they're alive, or if they completely transcend their karma through true non-attachment. Because what happens is when you transcend your karma through true non-attachment, that means that that pranamaya kosha, that prana body, that etheric body, it will gather another physical body, but you won't be attached to it this time. In other words, you leave the baggage behind and move on to the next level. That's one way. The other way is to completely neutralize the karma through austerities and sadhana, through doing work, right? And you neutralize your karma as much as you can so that the etheric body will not be your stopping place. But really, there's other, what's the word? There's other factors at play here as well. Because sometimes we just incarnate to deal with a little piece of something, right? So say for example, I already did all the work I need to do in existence, so I'm already good. Let's say that, I was able to go at least up to the highest point that I could, and I actually made the decision to come back just to neutralize a little bit more, or just figuratively speaking. So that incarnation, it wouldn't necessarily be a Buddha. It wouldn't necessarily be like some kind of advanced being. It will be someone with relatively decent good luck. But my life would be filled with certain challenges to deal with specific karma. And then at that point, I would return. So there are other factors at play. But generally speaking, at least the first 2 bodies begin to dissolve and are reabsorbed into the astral. And like I said, depending on how much karma is left there, those 2 bodies will reform. A lot of factors at play, though. But yeah, that last part you said, trying to stay in the Anandamaya kosha, that's the difficult part. Because of all the agitation and the karma and the movement, it prevents us from being still. Just like in the physical world, we're prevented from being still because the body's picking up all kinds of vibration. Nuru says one difference between a human and an angel is just layers of frequency of encoded light that your aura or light body can hold together and remain stable. Can you manage 72 nadis or 72 million? Yeah, that's a good point. Your capacity is a big thing that we're working on. Because even the example that the author gave, right? A rock cannot hold the capacity to do much of anything except break. That's why it's tamasic. Now, a plant has more capacity. A plant can actually move itself towards the sun or towards water, right? There's there's a capacity of intelligence there, which means that it has more to work with. It has presidency over more possibilities. Likewise, a dog has more possibilities. A human being has more possibilities than a dog, right? There's so many things that a human being can hold and fathom that a dog literally cannot. And you want to know something else? There's so many things that even a child can understand, but an adult can understand even more. So look at the level of capacity. A baby can't do much of anything except poop and pee and cry. But as its consciousness expands, so does its capacity. The potential is always there. Check that out. The potential for every child is always there, but it's about their capacity as it expands, as they get older, as they learn more. Likewise, the capacity for godhood, for Purusha, for Atman, it's there inside of you. You just slowly expand into it like a baby grows. And Dion Fortune says something very interesting about the archangels and the humans and the difference between the two. She mentions how the archangels are more advanced than humans in their present state, but it's humans that have the potential to expand even beyond them. In the same manner that, we can say a dog, not a puppy, but like say a 12-year-old dog, right? A really old dog will typically be pretty smart, pretty intelligent. As a matter of fact, it may be more intelligent than say a 3-year-old child, right? So at that time, the dog has more capacity, more intelligence than the human baby. But as long as that human child continues to live and grow, it will eventually surpass the dog by light years. That's the possibility we have in comparison to these archangels. Now, most people don't make it to that point, at least all at once, but eventually we will, because that is the natural nature of what we know as the human soul. It's not even really a human soul, really. It's soul. All living things are animated by the same force, and the more that same force begins to realize itself, that soul inside of matter, as long as that soul inside of matter begins to realize itself, that expansion process is very rapid. Let me know if what I said has made sense to you. Self-made sage, greetings. Self-made sage says, stopping by to drop a like and show love before I read Grant's Night Side of Eden. Peace and respect, bro. Peace. Nuru says, yes, Trav, it's literally called capacitance, an electrical engineering term which means it can hold more charge, more light, more magnetic power. Capacitance is the word. That's what we're dealing with here. So yeah, just like Nuru said in that statement, can you manage 72 nadis or 72 million? You know what, a lot of these yogis, they practice for years and decades, and they eventually come to capacitance of their physical body where they can actually move independent muscles and regulate their own blood pressure and blood flow and heartbeat and all these things that we're left to the unconscious. They become conscious of these parts of the body. And there are several books from the Bihar School of Yoga that start you on the process of doing that. So just imagine how much capability they have of their other bodies. So it's not so far-fetched. It just might not be practical for our Western reality, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist and it's not possible. Good stuff. So, the ninth path is called the pure intelligence because it purifies the emanations. It proves and tests and corrects the designing of their representations, which results, of course, in functional forms in the physical world, Malkuth. The integrating function over cellular and molecular life is covered in the remainder of the text, which reads, it disposes the unity with which they, the emanations, are designed, without diminution or division. Ultimately, the supreme integrated image of Yesod is that of the luminous image of the Creator, which is shown forth and concealed in the physical world. Thus, the God name of this Sephirah, Yesod, is Shaddai El-Kai, the Almighty Living God. Trinity Phillips says, "Hey Trav, happy to be here." I'm happy that you're here too, my brother. Good to see you. Good to see you. I know you pop by when you can, but I appreciate you. The Almighty Living God. Mm-mm-mm. And do you have the courage and the confidence to recognize that this is your very battery, this Almighty Living God? That is the source of you. That is the source of everything that you know. It exists within every cell of your being. You're not separate from it at all. It's literally one and the same as you and everything else. What did we learn from Gyan Yoga? Right? Those 4 Mahavakyas. You are that. You are that. I am that. Tatvamasi. I am that. Let me pull it out because I don't have the other 2 memorized yet. Aham Brahmasmi. I am that Brahman. See, I've been utilizing these as well in my meditation, and I see that this is very important, right? So this, what he was talking about in Gyan Yoga, wasn't even about just how to meditate right. He's telling you how to meditate right to have this realization. In other words, once you still the body and still the mind, you can really contemplate these phrases or these quotes from the Vedas that lead you to a realization of ultimate reality. Number 1, Aham Brahmasmi, I am the higher consciousness. See, you can't just think that with your regular everyday mind, because those thoughts are going to attach to regular everyday stuff, right? If you just go around and say, I am the higher consciousness, ego is going to get involved, right? Your memories and your personal attachments to this world are going to get involved. You can't talk to me like that because I'm the higher consciousness. No, because you got to look at the second one too. Tatvamasi, you are that, which means everything in your environment is higher consciousness as well. It helps you along the path of slowly dissolving those differences. Unity. Number 3, Ayam Atma Brahma. My soul is the higher consciousness. My soul is the higher consciousness. And then number 4, Prajnanam Brahman. Brahman is knowledge and realization. Look, I might not have emphasized it before, but if you're a part of the book study, right, those of you who are present right now, if you're part of the book study, you've gone through this book, these 4 statements are highly important. I would recommend writing them down. I'd recommend meditating on them and really, really trying to figure out what they mean. One of the things that Sivananda said, you know, the guy who taught and trained Swami Satchidananda, who taught and trained Niranjanananda, one of the things that he said was, you should be meditating on these 4 phrases constantly. 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 And if he says that, I'm definitely going to take that into consideration. I am the higher consciousness. You are that. My soul is the higher consciousness. Brahman is knowledge and realization. So keep that in mind. Something happens when knowledge and realization meet. Right? When knowledge and realization meet. This is on page 10 of Gyan Yoga. See, knowledge is just information. But realization is when the unity of that knowledge begins to come together, when the awareness expands to encompass the connecting links between this information. It becomes a realization, or in other words, understanding, right? If we look at the tree of life, we've got these 2 spheres represented as as wisdom and understanding. Notice how they coalesce in knowledge. Notice how they coalesce in Kether, Brahman. Metanetta says only those in the book study. I mean, you know, it's up to you. It's a figure of speech. If you have been reading this book and studying this book is what I mean, then it would behoove you to memorize those. I say if you've been studying these books because you would have somewhat of a foundation as to why. But you know, even if you're not in the book study, you would benefit greatly from reflecting on these phrases. But definitely, if you're someone who is working on your meditation practice, if you're working on your spiritual practice, right, and you've been watching my channel, then these four statements are definitely something to take serious. So, the reason I say that is because, he just mentioned the God level of this particular sphere, which is Shaddai El Chai. And truly, to reflect on the God level of any of these spheres, it's going to take a moment of still silence and reflection, and understanding that we're not talking about an external God out there somewhere. We're talking about the very force that animates your existence, your awareness, your body, everything. So you want to get into the habit of realizing that that is you. It's not some external outside entity. It is what you actually are. Behind the memories, behind the ego, behind everything that you think you are, underneath all that, this is who you actually are. Okay, so Nuru says, it is also a thing that many advanced yogis, samadhi can alter the weather, earth, and sun climate, and can bring on the passing from one yuga to another. Yogis directly emerge as the field. Ooh. You got 72 motherfuckers in your head. Nuru says, don't underestimate the ultimate power of your samadhi to affect the largest cosmic things. You're literally feeding magnetic coherence directly back to the sun when you meditate deeply and affects the weather. Man. Don't underestimate the ultimate power of your samadhi to affect the largest cosmic things. And ignorance of that is what causes suffering. It's easy to forget who we are. It's so easy to forget who we are. We literally do it time after time after time again. We literally forget who we are lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And even from day to day, it even affects me sometimes, right? Every now and then I'll forget who I am and I might start feeling some kind of way. But I've learned enough to not let that linger, of course. Because of my meditation practice, my subconscious mind and my idle thoughts are all filled with this information here. So any type of negative feeling, it may arise, but it doesn't last very long, right? I still have the fear impulse that arises, or the anger impulse, or the sad impulse that arises. They arise, right? Because those samskaras, they exist. But the difference is I don't allow those things to cause me to take any action based on them. So in other words, it's as if they don't even exist, right? See, if you've got feelings on the inside, you validate those feelings by acting on them. So if you're afraid, if you start fearing a certain outcome, it's going to lead you to behaving in a certain way to prevent that outcome. So you're literally planting action of fear. You've forgotten who you are. But in those moments of fear, this is why I made that post. If I have some type of thing that may be happening, a paranoid thought or a sad thought or angry, I always say to myself, even if, so what? And that starts to neutralize that fear and that pain, because a lot of our anxiety is caused by these scenarios that we create, right? We're afraid that, we're not going to be able to pay our bill. So we start thinking, oh no, well, that means I'll get kicked out, and then I can't do this, and I can't do this, and I can't do that. And it all piles up and adds up. Now that's having a very real emotional reaction on you. And it didn't even happen. It hasn't even happened. So imagine you do get the answer and figure out your problem, but you still burnt up all that energy stressing and suffering. You're even building some scars when you do that. I don't have time for it. I don't have time for it. So when these painful thoughts or fearful paranoia things come up, I literally say, even if that happens, so what? Right? Because then you have to answer that question. Oh, well, even if I can't pay my bill, then so what? Well, then that just means I'll have to figure out what to do, right? Maybe I'll have to move in with baby mama at worst case scenario, or move in with parents or brother. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are options. They won't be so pleasant, but it's not like the end of the world, right? Because there's an upside to it. Say if such a thing happened, all right, well, maybe I'll be able to save some money. Maybe I'll be able to have the space to plan better so this won't happen again, right? You keep going. You don't just stop at the fear. Even if, so what? And yes, this also goes for the Illuminati and all this other demiurge and all that other stuff. Don't do that. Wow, Society Eject says Psalm 91. It's funny you mention that, because that is definitely one that I have highlighted and exercised. Right, I've even got it written right there, 91. Read that if you didn't throw your Bible away. Psalm 91. Society Eject says, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." Exactly. And check this out. Who are we talking about? You said Almighty. Shaddai El Chai, the Almighty Living God. That's specifically who we're talking about right there. Thank you for connecting that. But yeah, don't forget who you are. Don't forget who you are. Number 5. Naturally, as Yesod is a Sephirah much concerned with the etheric, the images of pre-physical manifestation of all the higher emanations, and also the vast body of teaching developed about the moon, the great reflector of the sun's light. The archangel of the Sephirah is the archangel of the Annunciation, Gabriel, who gives the powers of vision. So check that out. What do we know about the moon? We know that the moon doesn't produce its own light, but rather it gathers the light of the sun and reflects it. Much in the same way that this etheric plane gathers the light of the astral and reflects it down to earth. Right? The sun, the moon, the earth. Serious business. So he said that what we'll find there is pre-physical manifestation of all the higher emanations. So we'll see the images of these higher emanations before they make physical manifestation. The thing before the thing. Or I should say the vision, the image of the thing before the thing. And that's represented by the archangel of Gabriel, who we know as the messenger, right? Who gave the vision. He also deals with the forming of a physical body, and he was, not by coincidence, the one who visited Mary and announced that she would be having a child. I wonder what was implied. See the chapter on Ladder of Lights for more. Page 51 to be exact. So, number 6. He can be imagined as a beautiful blue-green figure with silver flashes of light and a tremendous swirl of colors of various shades of peacock, tints shot with silver, which are his wings, or a part of his extensive aura, and about his head and beneath his feet, streams of liquid silver. It may be noted that these are not strictly speaking the Sephirotic colors, but one should not let the imagination be too closely bound by tradition, particularly with symbols like the flashing colors, Tatwa vision, for those of you who are in the inner light activation system. Particularly with symbols like the flashing colors, which are to a large extent arbitrary. The colors given above in connection with the Archangel Gabriel should evoke much of the sea and moon power, which is an integral part of the Sephirah of Yesod. Think about the sea, think about the moon, right? How when the moon is full, the tides rise, because there's something about the water element that has a deep connection with the moon. So it's not specifically just water, but those things that are represented as the water element. are all affected tremendously by the phases and cycles of the moon. So, of course, the etheric plane will be symbolized and represented by the moon yantra, which also deals with water, right? And look at where it's placed. You'll also see it in the Swadhisthana chakra, the sacral chakra. So keep all these correspondences in mind, because this is how you come into an understanding of what force we're talking about exactly. By the way, this entity that you see here is the very entity that you see here. No difference. You heard it here first. Don't let anybody fool you. Al-Diki says, Gabriel, he visited Muhammad too. Ah, I didn't know that. Or maybe I forgot that, because I think that does sound familiar, actually. So here he's talking about a visualization of Gabriel, right? So he just has a beautiful blue-green figure. Doesn't even have to be humanoid, but a beautiful blue-green figure, blue-green, right, with silver flashes of light, and almost like peacock-style wings, and wings that could even be seen as its aura, right? So it would even be good to kind of keep it somewhat vague and not too defined, but kind of see like a figure standing there, supermassive, bluish green. It's got silver water flowing everywhere around it, from its feet, from its head, and it's surrounded by this peacock swirling aura. This is Gabriel. And you get a feeling of the moon, you get a feeling of the sea. Society Eject says, could we go as far as saying that our sperm cells have the archetype of Gabriel, the intelligence, the information to create a body? Absolutely. Number 7, this anthropomorphic form can then be seen to change. All right, so now we're going to the next world, right? We've got these 4 worlds. We're going to the next one. This anthropomorphic form can then be seen to change into a tremendous pillar of silver light, perhaps with a mauve gray tinge, reaching up as far as the sky and standing on the earth. And around the pillar, again, clouds of peacock blue and green. This tremendous pillar should be conceived to be like a battery of the universe, an electric battery, and all actions of the universe are switched, as it were, onto you through this great battery. For this is the basis of vision, whether clairvoyance or clairaudience. So we go from this blue-green figure with the peacock-style aura wings, and we shift it to its higher octave, where it's this massive pillar of silver light with somewhat of a pinkish, grayish, mauve tinge. And as we see this being surrounded by clouds of peacock blue and green, we understand that this is actually the battery of the universe, an electric battery. And everything that's done is switched on through this battery onto us. Let's continue to its next manifestation, from the angelic to the archangelic and now to the God level. So number 8, the mighty silver pillar can then be changed to a 9-fold figure. 9, the number of Yesod. 9-fold figure, a solid figure with 9 sides of crystal, but reflecting silver and blue-green light. Imagine in that 9-fold figure a large amount of force from the former great silver and blue-green pillar, and watch it. Watch this solid as you would look into a crystal globe and see what appears. As a conclusion to this experiment, it is best to change the form back once more to the protecting, beautiful angelic form, radiating the powers of the moon and of water, which are qualities in tune with the visionary faculties that can give real and right understanding of the inner life. It is Gabriel who rules the living water streams that well out from the highest throne. And that's in Revelations 22, verse 1. And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and out of the Lamb. And also Genesis 2, I think 10. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from whence it was parted and became into four heads. Talking about Gabriel here. Now that first description was this force on the angelic plane, where what was the blue-green figure with the peacock wings. Then the silver pillar with the peacock clouds, that was the archangelic form. And then finally the god level form would be a solid figure with 9 sides of a crystal that you actually scry into. The higher levels are usually observed as like fractalized geometric type morphing forms. Useless Familiar says, maybe I can use this visualization during the LBRP. That would be a good idea. And there are also descriptions of the other 3 angels in this very same manner. Because if you're going to do it for one, you might as well do it for all, right? You don't want to show favorites. Tree Marie, good evening. Tree Marie says, Lord Krishna happens to wear a peacock feather on his head. Wasn't it Lord Krishna who served as somewhat of a messenger, bringing the divine word to his follower, and a book was written on that? A lot like Gabriel visited Muhammad. Interesting. The vision. Number 9. The order of angels of Yesod are the cherubim, the strong, which title is apposite when one considers that Yesod holds the etheric levels and stresses on which physical form depends. It is this conception which is also behind the magical image, the beautiful naked man, very strong, who could be equated with Atlas, who held the whole world on his shoulders, having the strength of those other classical foundations of the universe, the elephant and the tortoise and the eagle. Right? Check this out. We got the eagle, we got a tortoise, got an elephant, and we have a very strong man, Atlas, holding the world on his back. This should sound familiar, right? If you look at Vedic cosmology, you're going to see those massive 4 elements holding up the world. And guess what? Those 4 elements are riding on top of a super gigantic tortoise, right? And also we've got the eagle. So there's our Vedic reference, but check this out. There's another reference here, and I wonder if you can spot it before I read it. We got 4 creatures here, an eagle, a tortoise, an elephant, and a man. Does anything else come to mind? As far as, 4 living creatures. True Marie says Wheel of Fortune. Yes, that's the direction that I'm heading towards. Basically, the Shem HaMephrash, not the Shem HaMephrash, the Hayath HaKadesh, the 4 living creatures. The bull, the lion, the man, and the eagle, representing, of course, the 4 fixed elements. Yes, thank you very much. In a way, these 3 creatures, plus the man, Atlas, could be conceived of as reflections of the 4 holy living creatures of Kether. Also, the strong, beautiful man can be considered as our Lord, as a counterbalance to the Sunday school gentle Jesus, meek and mild conception, which has unfortunately grown up around him. Look at that. See, you got to put some respect on Jesus' name. He's not just gentle, meek, and mild. Look what it says here. Jesus, the strong man, who had the passive strength not to resist his persecutors, when all the time he had the power to do all those things that the devil tempted him with in the wilderness. who had sufficient presence, ether, prana, who had sufficient presence of power to impress and impel faith into a hard-bitten Roman centurion, whose servant was very sick, who had the power and knowledge over the etheric levels to heal the sick, perform miracles, raise the dead, and reconstruct his body again, glorified after 3 days. Some of this stuff should start making sense after we, thoroughly contemplate the etheric plane. Right? Number 10. The cherubim work on the building of knowledge and the harnessing of force in etheric or Yesodic methods, of which one is the use of symbols relating to Yesodic understanding within the depths of the subconscious mind. Understanding the symbols that relate to the subconscious mind. That shouldn't be anything new to us, right? With the progress of time, these symbols become less ritualistic and more mental, right? That is, they become tools in the hands of the various schools of psychoanalysis. Nevertheless, these images of psychological healing are still present-day versions of the contents of the Treasure House of Images. And the forces behind this therapy are the Order of Angels of Yesod, however fantastic that may sound to the scientific mind. The great powers in the etheric sphere are the angels themselves, the cherubim. And as the etheric powers are the great formative forces of the world and of man, these great forces must be taken into account by medical research if it is to have any value. Apart from the subconscious aspects which result in much psychosomatic disease, the complete understanding of the mechanism which works the body so that it may be cured in sickness, kept in good condition when it is well, and rejuvenated when it is old, are all contained in Yesod, and must be sought in Yesod, the etheric foundation behind the physical kingdom of Malkuth. That was quite a mouthful. I think all that was like 3 sentences. But yeah, the fact that he's talking about how a study of the etheric plane, this study at least is the easiest of the tree of life to be related to psychoanalysis, to psychology, because that's what we're dealing with when we talk about the etheric plane. We talk about Yesod. It's a representation of the forces that animate the forms, right? And what science has been giving to us as the subconscious mind, we're actually talking about the different levels of chitta, the different levels of Yesod, of the etheric plane. So all this stuff that I talked about on this list here, on this chart, these are all actually levels of what we're dealing with in Yesod. And by the time we get to this point, right here, we're dealing with Netzach. Particularly, we're dealing with the path between Malkuth and Netzach. Because see, the levels that I mentioned before, as far as the physical plane, the etheric plane, the lower astral, the higher astral, the mental, it isn't just the spheres that I'm pointing to. These 2 paths on either side of Yesod, this also represents the etheric plane. Excuse me, these 3 paths, can't forget that one. But all that right there represents the etheric plane. Now here is going to be the central point of that. But even this right here, right? Because see, Netzach is a bit higher than Yesod. And in Netzach, we're dealing with the collective unconscious. We're dealing with the memory of the race. Now, the path from here to here isn't necessarily a path straight from Malkuth to Netzach. It's still crossing that barrier of the etheric. So what this is represented as is those unconscious images beginning to come up to surface. Most of us know of this stuff as shadow work, right? Whenever these buried emotions and buried situations begin to surface, they come up as symbols. And these symbols, they either come up during dreams or they come up as something that we can't help but paying attention to. It's not the thing itself that's trying to get our attention, but something that thing is represented by. In other words, the image there is just a representation of the force. And so from the study of that type of thing, that's where we get psychoanalysis and psychology and even NLP. Because NLP is utilizing those forms and those images in the form of language. Through language, we're able to work with the collective unconscious, or the entire etheric plane, or the realm of intellect. So whenever you see me say the physical plane and the etheric plane, I'm not just pointing at Yesod, also pointing at these three paths as well. That's the etheric plane. Whenever I see collective unconscious, I automatically just think of Netzach. Collective unconscious, imagination, intellect, right? Okay. Number 11. It is in this direction that the new unorthodox methods of healing are progressing, such as anthroposophy, radionics, and the Alexander techniques. Often certain of these techniques work better with people who have some conscious awareness of their astral and etheric levels, and whose lower levels are thus less dense. There's a key as well. Once you start having more conscious awareness of your astral and etheric levels, that means that your physical levels become less dense. Hence why your appetite changes. Hence why a lot of the activities that you do change. People who have made a fetish of drugs, on the other hand, are less likely to be helped by vegetable and homeopathic treatments. Gotta pick one or the other, because your body begins to adapt if you're constantly taking those pills or other chemical injections. So people who have made a fetish of drugs, on the other hand, are less likely to be helped by vegetable and homeopathic treatments. However, on the inner levels, the increase of radioactive fallout is having the effect of rendering the etheric levels less dense, so that there is some good coming from this evil, it seems, though of course it can lead to terrible disease if not adequately controlled, as is well known. Sounds like what he's saying here is that even though we've started working with nuclear weapons and nuclear stuff in general, the radiation that comes off might be serving a good purpose, as it's starting to weaken physical form in general, not just the people around the facilities, but in general. And maybe that's the purpose for nuclear science, so that we can begin to deteriorate the physical plane to allow the force to be liberated. Maybe it's a good thing. Never thought of it like that. So now you can stop being afraid of things like CERN, because maybe there's a good purpose. Interesting. Number 12. The mundane chakra of Yesod is the moon, and the moon is intimately connected with the growth of plants, and there is much forgotten lore regarding herbs and plants and their influence on sickness and other matters which Paracelsus tried to revive, and which are still revived today, though lack of scientific method does not help the cause much, and it is a happy hunting ground for cranks and faddists. 13. The moon is intimately connected with the earth, as the etheric plane is intimately connected with the physical. The power of the etheric vitality is as the power of the moon, which produces the great movements of the tides of the sea on the face of this earth. And the cyclic activity of the etheric machinery of the universe is as the cyclic activity of the moon, and the physiological cycle of woman, the moon sex. Goodness gracious. Tree Marie says even Oppenheimer quoted the Bhagavad Gita after he detonated the first nuclear bomb. Right? Shiva, the destroyer of worlds. And see, when you hear that, Shiva, the destroyer of worlds, it sounds so negative and scary. But that's the purpose. That's the tamasic aspect of divinity. The breaking down of these worlds. It's not the end, right? Even if, so what? It's not the end if the world breaks down. Because what is contained within the world becomes liberated. It has to be broken down. The same way that you have to crack an egg to make an omelet. Or a better example, the same way that a seed, when it's planted, it has to break out of that seed, out of that shell. The shell has to be destroyed in order for what's inside that seed to be liberated. Destruction ain't so bad. So another key to remember, he says, the cyclic activity of the etheric machinery of the universe is as the cyclic activity of the moon and the physiological cycle of woman, the moon sex. So we've got quite a few correspondences here to be able to think of the etheric plane. We got a few examples here. Because even though the etheric plane isn't physical, it is still connected with time. Less connected, but it's still connected. And that weak connection, I'll say, manifests itself as this fourfold cycle that the moon typically goes through. It's a repeating cycle, from full to empty, from full to empty. The same thing's happening with the etheric plane. That's how it works. Which is why the moon is such an important thing to be considered when working with magic. And if you don't have this book, it might be a good idea to look into it, you know? Because what I like best about this book is towards the end, well, maybe more in the middle, we'll say, it gives you it gives a chart for exactly where the moon is every single day of the year. So today we're looking at the 25th. And this morning at 6:15 a.m., the moon went into Pisces. So you can work with the correspondences there. You can even look ahead and see what's going to happen in the next few months. So it tells you about when the full moon is, when the new moon is, etc., etc. But yeah, this is called the Moon Book. So if that's something that you're interested in, at least now you see why. Because yeah, the moon is intricately related with the earth, just like the etheric plane is intricately related with the physical plane. Tree Marie says Western. Yeah, so it is Western. I'm sure there might be a Vedic one, an Eastern one somewhere, but it's convenient for now. Society Eject says, so when people say they're astral traveling, they're just barely touching Yesod. They're really etheric traveling. Exactly. That's why I keep saying that. Like, you know, I'm not trying to be a jerk or anything, but that's just the way it is. I highly doubt that, you know, it is what it is. It is what it is. Tree Marie says, Drick Pan Chang. Okay, yeah. So that is, I believe it was you that recommended that site before. But it has a list of the same thing that I just showed, except for Vedic astrology, not Western. Drik Pan Chang. Greetings, Caesar. Okay, so 14. In addition to this, there is also the vast amount of esoteric teaching which centers about the moon. For the moon and the sun are two great principles which have their analogs in the pillars behind the whole of manifestation. I don't have my tarot cards, but if you look at the moon tarot card, that's definitely what you're going to see, those two pillars. All right? Yeah, a whole lot of symbology there with the lobster crayfish coming out the water. That represents evolution, really, coming out of the subconscious mind to pass those wild wolves, or the wolf and the dog, which represents the untamed primal essence, and then the tamed, domesticated primal essence, and the fact that they're still related. The only difference is their lifestyle. Just like that lobster coming out of the water represents the evolution from a sea-dwelling creature to a land-dwelling creature and beyond. We're looking at the dark side of the moon. Specifically, I'm talking about this path here, which is represented by the moon tarot card. And the Hebrew symbol associated with this path is represented by the back of the head, which is also represented by the dark side of the moon. So if this is represented by the back of the head, then the sun card represents the front of the head, which is the conscious mind. But with this representing the back of the head, it's actually symbolically referring to the subconscious mind. So again, a lot of the things that are taking place between the collective unconscious and the manifest dimension. But notice how it's still connected to this etheric information. That's some advanced correspondence there for you. Okay, so in addition to this, there is also a vast amount of esoteric teaching which centers about the moon. For the moon and the sun are two great principles which have their analogs in the pillars behind the whole of manifestation. It can be said that Pan and Isis are aspects of the Yesod sphere because Pan gives the idea of archetypal strength, which is characteristic of the etheric and of the action of the moon on Earth. You got to be pretty strong to make all the water rise to the surface. And Isis gives the idea of the archetypal virginity of the feminine side of God, the whole receptive side of things, which is shown forth by the reflection of the sun's light by the moon, and by the Sephirah Yesod being the receptacle of all the higher emanations, for them to be formed into the images, which are the basis of forms in the physical world. So really we can see that Isis can be attributed to multiple places on the tree. We've seen her related to Binah. I've seen her related to Malkuth, and now we're seeing her related to Yesod. And what he's saying here is that Isis gives the idea of archetypal virginity of the feminine side of God, the whole receptive side of things, which is shown forth by the reflection of the sun's light by the moon, and by the Sephirah Yesod being the receptacle of all the higher emanations, for them to be formed into the images, which are the basis of forms in the physical world. Also, the main function of Yesod, the mechanism by which the human race lives and dies, is born and mated, is also the function of the Great Mother, or Isis, for Isis contains all other goddesses. I've been saying that for the longest. Matthew Watson says Bindu. Yeah, so we can't forget about that also. The Bindu is the point associated with the back of the head when we're dealing with the chakras. So that third eye chakra, it's only related by the forehead and the center of the head, but in the back, it's a completely different black dot known as the bindu. There's a picture of it in Dharana Darshan, which I conveniently don't have next to me right now. Tree Marie says, sounds like Prakriti. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. To be honest, when we're looking at this science, we might as well just say what's going on here. This entire tree is Prakriti. At least below Kether. This whole thing is Prakriti, different degrees of Prakriti. And this image in the back, which isn't actually there, is Purusha. So the union and the synthesis of the two would be taking place at the crown and beyond the crown, which we could even say is Brahman. Brahman is probably more likely related to what's beyond the crown, but yeah, we're still dealing with Purusha and Prakriti. We have not drifted away from what we've been studying. We're just seeing it from a whole nother angle. There's Purusha in the back, and he's wearing Prakriti. And then look, doesn't it make sense? Just like what we learned in Samkhya Darshan, what he talked about was basically Prakriti takes on the form of the force of Purusha. So everything that Prakriti is active matter with no consciousness. Purusha's consciousness with no activity. So they work together. Prakriti shapes herself into the form of Purusha. That's literally what's happening right here. That's how the tree is laid out the way that it is. Man, it's really deep stuff if you know what time it is. Ay. Goodness gracious. So cool. Okay, stay focused. So, 15. There is also the magical side of the moon, and Yesod is more important magically than any other Sephirah except possibly Hod. So, let me read that again. There is also the magical side of the moon, and Yesod is more important. Yesod is more important magically than any other Sephirah except possibly Hod. It being a moon Sephirah, the god Thoth is also intimately connected with Yesod. This fact is behind some of the legends which tell of Thoth being a helper of Isis. As Yesod is so intimately connected with the purification and unification of forms, its relevance to practical magic will be obvious. For all higher forces have to pass through Yesod before they can manifest physically in Malkuth. So in case you have any questions about these two paths here, this is what he said. He said all higher forces have to pass through Yesod before they can manifest physically into Malkuth, right? So Yesod is a level. It's a level. All these paths here are still associated with Yesod. So it's not like you're skipping Yesod to get to Malkuth. No, these paths still represent aspects or shades of that level that we call Yesod or the etheric plane. There's no bypassing it. It's more real than we are. We're the it, to be quite honest. We look at this thing, we look at these angels, we look at the God, and we say it. But in truth, we're the it to it. We are the result of the perfecting and the unification of the forms that happen here. We're the result of that. Caesar says, I'm cornfused. Well, what are you confused about? What is the question that you have? So, 16. The attribution of the sandals to Yesod also shows the close magical link with the Sephirah Hod, for one aspect of them is the winged sandals of the great messenger, which refers to Hermes, Mercury, and Thoth. In another sense, the sandals are magical implements which enable one to walk with ease on the foundations of the various psychic levels. So I'm seeing a whole lot of reference here also to Thoth or to Hudi or Hermes or the magician card. See this, it gets kind of complex when you think of all the parts that work together, but there is a symbolic relationship between Yesod, Hod, and the Magus card up here between Kether and Bina. Because look exactly at what's happening. The aspect of the tree up here, represented by the Magician card, connecting Kether to Bina, is literally the organizing of pure force into forms that can be worked with. So if you look at the Magician card, he's standing there with his arm up, pointing to Kether, and his arm pointing down to the rest of the tree. And he's got a wand symbolizing that he is the conduit for assembling the force. And what's it assembled into? It's assembled into the 4 elements, plus the 5th, which is him. So we've got taking the pure, raw, undifferentiated force, bursting out, which is represented by the Fool card. He's taking that force and he's putting it into form, and that is what's represented by Bina. And Bina is the master of forms, the master architect of creation, right? The seed of creation is here, but we see its final manifestation down here. And he was saying that this is the sphere of magic, closely related, most importantly connected to magic, second only to Hod. Hod is the actual sphere of the magician, right? Because it's here that we are going from collective unconscious and undifferentiated form, and we're starting to slice it up and put them all in their place. But here, right, here is where these forms have their independent existence, so to speak. So every form that's created here, the force that's coming down has now been separated and split up and allocated. You ever have a coin machine where you put a bunch of quarters and dimes and nickels into it, and it shakes and it vibrates, but it assembles all the pennies and dimes and quarters into their appropriate slots and bags them all up? That's what's happening here. So all the different, we can see Tifereth as the prism, and the light coming down hits that prism and splits out into a rainbow. Now that rainbow could be represented as all the bunch of different coins going into that coin machine, right? Now here's the coin machine. It's jiggling. Now all the coins are being put into their own holes, wrapped up nicely, and finally dispensed in Malkuth. But this is the work of the magician. The job description of the magician, of the magus, is to convert force into form, right? And you can see this as establishing the kingdom, right? You can see this as bringing back the Garden of Eden by sorting and placing everything where it's supposed to be. That's why the magician card has his tools out in front of him and he's pointing above, down below. I'm here about my Father's business. But that process is pretty much finalized here in Yesod. So all the talk that he's saying here about Thoth and Tahuti and Hermes, just keep in mind that's also talking about the magician card. Now, with that being said, we could look at the relationship between Yesod and Hod, which is represented by the Sun card. And as I mentioned before, we got the Sun card being represented by this path here. And then we got the Moon card being represented by this path here. So we've got the collective unconscious right here with forms emerging. And up here, we've got the conscious mind. We've got the light, the sun actually shining on the moon. Well, more so here, but here is where we begin to intellectualize it and understand it. Here's where we can see those forms being split up. The coin machine jiggling the coins and putting them in the proper place. You won't believe how deep this stuff goes once you really start putting these pieces together. No confusion, no guessing, no making shit up. It's time to get the science. We grow natural, peace, peace. Tree Marie says Yesod equals moon. Moon equals mind. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And it was you that said last time, Chandra Masay Namaha. Chandra, and I said that Yesod and Chitta are one and the same. And there's a root between Chitta and Chandra, which is the god of the moon. Did you guys do your mantras today? Oh wow, what a coincidence. We're talking about the moon on a Monday. Teehee. Man. Society Eject says, yo, LOL, you just dropped 16 bars. For those who have an ear to hear it, my friend. Society Eject says, you just showed us within 2 minutes how to manifest anything we want down here. Man, I tell you, dude. I've done it in 9-hour videos, 30-minute videos, 1-minute videos. But at the end of the day, only those of us who can recognize it are going to recognize it. That's one thing I've learned. You can give somebody a diamond, but if they don't know what it is, they're going to lose it, break it, and give it away. Tree Marie says, apropos, solar eclipse on the 30th. Oh, that's right around the corner. I wonder what we'll do on that day. I know I'm going to get sleepy because I always get sleepy on solar eclipses. But hopefully before I fall asleep, maybe I can put something together. Or allow something to rise from the collective unconscious. So the sandals, the reason that the sandals are a symbol of Yesod is because we talk about Hermes, right? He says the attribution of the sandals to Yesod also shows the close magical link with the Sephirah Hod. For one aspect of them is the winged sandals of the great messenger, which refers to Hermes, Mercury, and Thoth. In another sense, the sandals are magical implements which enable one to walk with ease on the foundations of the various psychic levels. And didn't we talk last time about the winged sandals? And then you guys were bringing up the different superheroes. Of course, the Flash, and also Captain America, and I think Stray Panther even said Hawkman. We got these different entities with these wings. That is a shout out to the collective unconscious about the messenger, about the magician card, about Hermes, about Thoth, Tahuti. That's what you're seeing whenever you see that. Okay, give me just a quick second. I will be right back. Don't touch that dial. I am for real. And also hit the like button if you haven't already. Jesus loves me, yes I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones who hear me know, they are weak and he is strong. Who remembers that song? All right, so we're back. All right. Turning thoughts into things. Absolutely. All right, let's continue. So, I got a new book. Can't wait to figure out what it is after this live stream, of course. Okay, so yeah, we're talking about the sandals, the winged sandals. In another sense, the sandals are magical implements which enable one to walk with ease on the foundations of the various psychic levels. So those of us who have been doing the meditations, and especially you guys who've been a part of the inner light activation system, know that there are specific meditations and path workings and rituals that we have done to be able to make this walking on the foundations of the psychic levels a lot easier, right? So number 17. The perfumes, also assigned to Yesod, contain another whole branch of the understanding of the etheric vibrations behind minerals and plants, right? Because what are perfumes and oils made of? Minerals and plants, essential oils. This again is part of the moon aspect of Yesod, and a sphere which has been little investigated in spite of the profound changes of consciousness that can be affected by means of various perfumes, as indeed with music, right? As the unfortunate remarked, how quickly do our thoughts turn away from earthly things when the drifting smoke of incense comes to us from the high altar? How quickly do they return to them again when we get a whiff of patchouli from the next pew? Furthermore, there is the higher esoteric side to perfume, which we have already touched upon with references to Isis and Doth. There is a strong connection between Doth and Yesod, and they are said to be opposite poles of the magical circuit. That is, Doth is the highest and Yesod is the lowest part of the psyche, when the physical body and Malkuth and the spiritual levels of the supernal triad are discounted. They are the extreme poles of the link between spirit and matter. Or for those of us who know the deal, we can say they are the extreme poles of the link between Purusha and Prakriti. Ooh. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire. So basically, the first part, the exoteric part that they were saying was that smell and scent, as we know, can alter our state of mind. It can put us in a trance. It can evoke memories that have been long forgotten. I know this to be true. Hopefully you do as well. That there are certain thoughts, there are certain smells that trigger memories that we don't even think about until we smell it again. Well, this is also an aspect of what's happening in Yesod, because the smell in itself doesn't carry any memories. No, but the vibration of that smell triggers something in the etheric plane to rise to the surface. Music does the same thing. And notice how these are not things coming through the eyes, right? These are utilizing your other senses. We put a lot of importance on our vision, and we should be grateful and respectful of our vision. But magic happens with the other senses too, through smell and through sound, we know, scent and music. I love me some Fruity Pebbles, Fruit Loops essential oil. It smells wonderful. It smells exactly like a time period, which I recall to be very pleasant. And no matter how much I smell those smells, that feeling doesn't go away. If anything, it's getting stronger because I'm using it precisely for what I want to use it for. But then she says on the esoteric level, what we're dealing with here is a connection between Doth and Yesod, which if you fold the tree exactly at Tifereth, you're going to see that Doth overlaps Yesod. So it is an echo here. Tifereth is truly the center of the tree. And if there is Doth here, which rides over the abyss where most people are unable to cross at their current level, the same thing is going to be happening down here. There is an abyss, and I said that before. There is an abyss between Malkuth and Yesod, and that very abyss is what makes it difficult for some people to understand this information. When you start talking to somebody about this information and their eyes glaze over, or they change the subject, or they laugh or don't care, like there's something inside that makes a person reject the information. That's represented as this lower abyss. And the abyss is so deep, you don't know how deep that abyss is? The same way that you lay down with your physical body in the bed and start to go to sleep, suddenly you're in a dream, right? Now, the space between you falling asleep and entering a dream, that is the same abyss. How deep was it? How far does it go? Now, you are able to make it across eventually, but you don't remember the transition. The same thing happens up here. And likewise, when you're doing ritual work and you go into a state of meditative focus, especially if you're gazing at a yantra or even a goetic sigil, you will come to that point where you start to become a bit sleepy because the body is getting so relaxed it doesn't know what else to do but to go to sleep, which is why you have to exercise dharana and focus, because you can hold your focus on that symbol even as the mind crosses that barrier of sleep, and you actually make it across that barrier with your lifeboat or your raft of the thing that you are meditating on. I've done it hundreds of times, working with the goetic spirit, and you stay focused on that sigil until you start to fall asleep. But when you awake in those inner planes, you've guided yourself specifically to a point because of your focus on a symbol. I'm giving away sweet secrets to those 24 of you who are present. Absolutely not for everybody. Society Eject says, yo, that perfume, I tell everybody when my daughter was born, there was a sweet perfume smell that I smell in the same smell when people passed away around me. Society Eject says, Doth and Yesod, Doth kick your ass right back to Yesod. It's funny. It's funny. Tree Marie says Tritaka. Yes, yet another discipline that we can thank the Vedics for introducing. Tritaka, which is extreme focus on that sigil. I used to be kind of like weary about talking about certain things, but at this point, it don't matter. I'm gonna say it because if I have the inkling to say it, that means somebody here can understand it. So I mean, really, there's no problem in giving away some of the higher information, because just like you can't skip second grade to get to the 8th grade, you know, what are you going to do with it if you don't know how to meditate in the first place? But it's all going into the subconscious mind so that you can use it later when you're ready, for those of you who are not ready yet. But for those of you who are ready, so many beautiful things to experience. Good stuff. Yoga Nidra. IDK Peace, bro. All right, let's keep going with it. Oh my gosh. Tree Marie says, Tritaka ain't no joke. Once you train your eyeballs to literally dry out. Oof. Yeah. But it's effective, and it's like, I feel that even minor discomforts like that, enduring minor discomforts like that kind of trains me to be able to endure larger discomforts. Because, we often run away from pain, even if it's small pain. But training yourself to stay focused despite discomfort, I think that echoes even in your larger actions. For sure. Okay, so 18. In the chapter on Doth, mention was made of Moses and the moon mountain of Sinai, and the Old Testament as a whole contains a vast compendium of Yesodic symbolism. Uh-oh. The Old Testament as a whole contains a vast compendium of Yesodic symbolism. Wait, do you mean that there's a relationship between Brahma and Abraham? Probably more than you would believe. Matter of fact, for both entries of Brahma and Abraham, it says see Brahma and Abraham. In other words, if you're reading about Brahma, it tells you to go look up Abraham. And then you go look up Abraham and it tells you to go look up Brahma. In other words, it's showing you, in this book, they're showing you the similarities between those two. One for the east, one for the west. Bhima. But yeah, that's not the topic right now. We'll get to that later. Much has been obliterated through the course of the ages and by translation, but the great symbols of moon worship are there for those who care to look for them. 19. To begin with, as Genesis tells us, the nomadic tribe which became known as the Jews came forth originally from Ur of Chaldees. Ur was the great moon city of Chaldea, Chandra, Chitta. Ur was the great moon city of Chaldea and carried great teaching of the water and the moon in the worship of that strange being, Ea, the divine man-fish, who, according to Berosus, the Babylonian priest and historian, wrote a book on the origin of things and the beginnings of civilization and gave it to men. That sounds a lot like Metatron and Raziel. This book probably gave those accounts of the deluge and the Tower of Babel, which appear in fragments from the royal library at Nineveh, as well as in the Bible. Oh yeah, this part's pretty cool. Pretty cool to even just consider this. Pay attention. Check this out. Ea, or Oannes, as the Greeks later call him, says Berosus, used to spend the whole day amidst men, without taking any food, and he gave them an insight into the letters and sciences and every kind of art. He taught them how to found cities, to construct temples, to introduce laws, and to measure land. He showed them how to sow seeds and gather in crops. In short, he instructed them in everything that softens manners and makes up civilization, so that from that time, no one has invented anything new. Dang. Then, when the sun went down, this monstrous Oannes used to plunge back into the sea and spend the night in the midst of the boundless waves, for he was amphibious. Does that bring anything to mind for anybody? Does that sound pretty awesome? So basically what they're talking about is that in the ancient times, there was Ea, or Oannes, who was this being who seemed to be a land walker and also a sea dweller. And this entity came amongst men and literally taught them everything. I'm talking about everything. They said here, what was it? Yeah. In short, he instructed them in everything that softens manners and makes up civilization, so that from that time, no one has invented anything new. Imagine that. We're talking about the most advanced civilization on the planet. Fantastic planet type stuff, right? And then when the sun went down, he went back into the sea, right, into the boundless sea. So right here we've got a description of what a particular entity is known for, how this particular entity assists man. I wonder if you were to be able to find a sigil, or maybe some type of mantra, or maybe even a Vedic connection, I wonder if you could work with this entity to learn how to do virtually anything. I wonder who this might represent. I wonder if I pull out this book that I keep flashing, what would it say about this particular deity? Being this lord of the Yesod, your lord of the etheric plane. I wonder. For the curious, maybe that could be something that you can look up. While we're here, might as well. So, Oannes, Babylonian, Chaldean, Sumerian, Greek, also known as Eos, also known as Dagon, also known as Ea, right here. So, let's see. Earth deity. Oannes is the Greek name for Ea, the god of wisdom, who taught agriculture, irrigation, and shipbuilding to the Babylonians. In Sumerian myth, Oannes came from the sea to bestow knowledge of the arts, sciences, and culture upon the people. At the end of each day, he returned to the sea. He is depicted as half fish, half man monster, or goat. Well, that was a jump. Half fish, half man monster, or goat. In Syrian myth, his mate is the sea goddess Ataryatis Derketo, also known as Atargatis, and he is the father of Semiramis, who became the queen of Babylon, or the Statue of Liberty, right? See also Ea, Asus, Eos, Atargatis, Ea, Poseidon, Semiramis. And and also talking about this water and this sea, we don't have to take that literally, right? We don't have to literally talk about the ocean, because that can also be represented as the subconscious mind. That can also be represented as the inner planes, which are commonly depicted as the sea. But specifically, we're talking about Yesod, the etheric plane. So who is this rider on the waters? Interesting. We've got the Ashvins and the Ashvinis. But I'm looking for Atargatis. Atalanta. I didn't know that the city was named after a goddess. One of the names of Atargatis is Ata. Interesting. Interesting. Peace, Caesar. Have a good night. Greetings, MC Maestro. Just real quick, Atargatis, also known as Ata, possible original name. Who are we invoking when we do the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram? So Atargatis was originally a goddess of fertility. She descended as an egg from heaven and emerged as a mermaid goddess. There goes that egg again. Purusha, Tatwashuti. She descended as an egg from heaven and emerged as a mermaid goddess. Her origins lead some to call her the mother of mermaids. So those of you who are obsessed with mermaids, you now have a goddess, Atargatis. A jealous rival cursed her with an unabiding love for a handsome young man. To ensure his fidelity, she caused him to disappear. A daughter, Semiramis, resulted from the union. Atargatis left. Oh wow, wait a minute now. She caused him to disappear. Divine masculine is always missing. A daughter, Semiramis, resulted from the union. Atargatis left her daughter in the care of doves in the wilderness and then threw herself into a lake and became a fish. She may have been the mate of Hadad. At a later date, she was worshipped by the Romans. Devoted eunuchs self-abused themselves, which means they cut off their own private parts. Devoted eunuchs self-abused themselves and performed ecstatic dances in her honor. A tar goddess is depicted with the tail of a fish as a sky goddess in a diaphanous veil with eagles around her head, and as a sea goddess with a dolphin crown. She may be a combination of Athar and Ate. See also Cybele, Ishtar, Oannes, and Semiramis. Interesting. Clues for research. Clues, clues, clues. Matthew Watson says, Trav about to have me on my Edward Elric study. After work, that book came today for a reason. Matt Mariconi, peace. Tree Marie says, a daughter, Ganga. Uh-oh. I'll let you guys figure it out if you can. There's more to it, of course, but that's just something really, really, really interesting. Love, love, love. Peace and greetings. All right, let's keep going. So the sun went down, and this monstrous Oannes, who taught everybody everything, so much so that nothing new has ever been invented from his time. Then he went down. When the sun went down, this monstrous Oannes used to plunge back into the sea and spend the night in the midst of the boundless waves, for he was amphibious. Let's see what he says here. 20. Shrouded as it is in the depths of legend and mythology, we cannot be sure whether the sea is meant as such, or whether the etheric sea is meant. In legend, many things can be implied by the apparently physical descriptions. And when you're reading these descriptions of these deities, please understand that. He says, in legend, many things can be implied by the apparently physical descriptions. For example, Doth consciousness is usually symbolized by the seer ascending a mountain or going to an upper room. From the description of his functions, however, Ea was obviously what esoteric tradition calls a Manu, or leader, a civilizer of an early race. These beings are said to have had no permanent physical bodies, but to have materialized etherically, somewhat after the fashion that ectoplasmic materializations occur in the seance room. In those days, too, it is said that all men had etheric vision, so that the Manu was visible to all. Be that as it may, it was from this background of tradition that the early Jews descended. That's kind of hard to imagine, especially since we live in such a dense society and everyone's extremely materialistic. We couldn't fathom what it would be like to live in a society where, most everyone is realized, right? Where most everyone is connected to these inner planes and live by them. We have to scrounge and scrap to meet people who understand what we're talking about. But just imagine if this was more commonplace, then of course it would be common to be in contact and communication with divine entities, right? So imagine just whole groups of people who are able to manifest, invoke, and commune with higher intelligences. This is what we were dealing with in the past. For some reason, people convince themselves that we currently live in the most advanced society, which is not true. This is not the most advanced society. We've actually drifted pretty far away from the most advanced society. And things left on the planet show us that, demonstrate to us that. Can you imagine someone who is descending from an ignorant culture, digging up artifacts of a hyper advanced culture and fixing their lips to even pretend to understand what it is that they're looking at? Wild. Yet that's what we have with our archaeology. A lot of our history is based on people who dug up a lot of this information and didn't understand it, at least on the exoteric. Keep in mind, there have always been esoteric practitioners. So there have been a good amount of people who understood what was actually going on in the past, but all that information isn't shared to the general public because the general public couldn't accept it. There's no reason to share with the general public. But we're returning back to that realm, which is why this is here for us to read about every day. Kali-yuga, says Tree Marie. Exactly. Kali-yuga. 21. The moon powers and the sea powers were worshipped as gods before men worshipped the full force of the sun power, right? We worship the moon long before we worship the sun. The moon powers and sea powers were worshipped as gods before men worshipped the full force of the sun power. And though Jehovah eventually became strongly identified with the sun, from early days, he was a moon force. Uh-oh. Can't say that in church. Thus, the great power of the moon regarding fertility became, with the ancient Jews, a sacred thing, as for example in the ritual of circumcision instituted by Abraham. 22. In the early days, the moon was worshipped as a god as well as a goddess, and certain races inclined more to one side or the other, right? So the moon was worshipped as both god and goddess, and some groups worship the male aspect, some groups worship the female aspect. The Jews, of course, tended towards the male side, and some confusion generally resulted when the race encountered rival tribes who worshipped a female representation of the same force, such as Ishtar or Astarte. The strange book, The Song of Solomon, probably stems from one of these encounters, for its real meaning undoubtedly refers to the dark aspects of the moon goddess. I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. Look not upon me because I am black, because the sun hath looked upon me. 23. Solomon and Huram are two examples of magical figures where, although historically certain men corresponding with them can be said to have existed, they are really great archetypal figures ensouled by great forces to a degree far beyond that which any mortal could have borne. These figures occur in all races, as for example King Arthur, Robin Hood, and so on, and the process even works with fairly contemporary figures, such as the heroes of the Wild West. 24. The second book of Chronicles tells of the construction of the great Temple of Solomon, which was built with the assistance of Huram, the king of Tyre, who had also assisted David. The temple was constructed with very intricate and precise measurements, a great moon ritual of measurement and the pure and exact forms of Yesod. And the symbolism is well worth study, for it embodies such things as representations of the cherubim, the Yesodic order of angels, and pillars surmounted with pomegranates, definite feminine symbols. And in the midst was placed the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark is a great moon and sea symbol, and thus early origins of this cult can be traced in the story of Noah's Ark, which was also constructed according to precise measurement, and to the story of Jonah and the whale. You mean he didn't really get swallowed up by a whale and live in his belly? Although the moon symbols refer much to fertility, it is not only a matter of physical fertility, but also of fertility of the mind and imagination and soul as well. The higher teaching of the Ark is that it is a vessel of mystery, a primitive and Eastern type of the Holy Grail. And the Holy Grail is the point of fusion between planes, where a receptacle is made in lower consciousness that can act as a container or giver of form to forces of higher consciousness. Please tell me you heard that last sentence. Tree Marie says, like Pinocchio. Man. Yes, yes. Hell yes. The higher teaching of the Ark is that it is a vessel of mystery, a primitive and Eastern type of Holy Grail, and the Holy Grail is the point of fusion between planes, where a receptacle is made in lower consciousness that can act as a container or giver of form to forces of higher consciousness. Nuru says, Sumerian scholars say Ea is Enki, a Sirius Anunnaki, who was also Osiris, one genetic source of humans, depicted as blue-green god, also Nurimud, having reptilian DNA, a water deity who reseeded Earth. Interesting colors, blue and green, peacock style. Gabriel, archangel related to water, messenger, visionary. Also the giver of bodies. Interesting. Thank you for that, Nuru. Ea, Inki, Osiris, Nurimud. I haven't heard of Nurimud. I think I might look that up real quick since I've got this book out. Nurimud. Oh, they don't have him in this book. Tree Marie says Krishna. What did Krishna do? I wonder how Krishna connects to this whole thing. Good stuff. All right. "26. There is also the whole tradition of stellar teaching connected with sea mysteries, for the sea, like stone, is a symbol of cosmic space. Knowledge of the stellar bodies reached a great height among the priests of Chaldea. Number plays a significant part in the Old Testament, and in connection with the story of David, there is the tale of a mortal skirmish between 12 men against 12, and in a subsequent battle, the death of 360 men. That's in 2 Samuel chapter 2. Obscured by translation and retranslation and commentary, this probably relates to early zodiacal symbolism, and to the calendar, for the number of days in the year was held to be 360 in early times. David also was anxious to fetch the Ark of the Covenant so that it should be set in a worthy place and received into the nation with proper state, and to do that he danced before it. We can take that this was not mere primitive exuberance, but a definite ritual act, and probably the ancient dance of the stars, and an imitation of the movement of the stars in the sky. Just imagine all the different things that science and historians called primitive, only because their understanding of it was extremely lacking. Imagine all the things that founded our depiction of history, given to us by people who didn't even understand what they were presenting. And then think about the power of these symbols, right? How they can say that hieroglyphics and carvings and statues were made by primitive people, not realizing that even these serve as yantras, which serve to establish and continue the connection of its racial descendants and also humanity as a whole. In other words, do we necessarily have to understand logically what a symbol represents in order for it to have an influence upon us? I didn't understand what this symbol represented when I had it in my face for years. But as my understanding of it grew, looking back into hindsight, I can see the effect that the symbol has had on me all my life. Do we need to have a logical definition of a symbol before it can have an effect on us? Do we need to have a logical definition? The answer is a whopping no. Now, having an understanding, a logical understanding of it certainly does help. It gives you more options, that's for sure. But until you have more or less earned that, you're under its influence, which is not a bad thing at all. I'd rather be under the influence of something that is pure, divine, and holy, than to not be. 27. Finally, there is the great racial leader Moses, who, like so many Jewish leaders, had been in Egypt, the center of mystery training. Being the man he was, it was extremely likely that he had studied in the Egyptian priesthood and may well have been a priest of the great moon god Osiris, the great ruler, as Moses himself was to become. A strong Yesod contact can be made by visualizing this great teacher of moon mysteries upon the moon mountain of Sinai. He can be imagined after the manner of the well-known statue by Michelangelo, a somewhat spade-like face, very thick hair which has almost a vital strength as if a living creature in itself. And from the pineal gland, stretching out from either side of the forehead, can be imagined two great sword-like streams of light. Mount Sinai can be pictured as a great mountain of volcanic origin, gray and dark in color, and stretching up far into the clouds. There's a visualization that could possibly connect you with an avatar of this Yesod energy, this moon plane leader. If anybody has a physical copy of this book, I'd like to ask you to check verse 28, just out of curiosity, to see if it has the same typo here, where it says well-known statue by Michelangelo. The well-known is all fused together as one word here. Doesn't mean anything, just want to know. "29. This image, strongly built, may well bring a kind of doth contact," right? You want to work with doth? Visualize what he said there in verse 28. So this image, strongly built, may well bring a kind of doth contact, for it must have been a state of doth consciousness that Moses was in, to receive direct divine contact and formulate the potent supernatural forces impacted on his higher consciousness into language and precepts to be handed down as the basic laws of the race. That was all one sentence. He must have been excited with this part. This image, strongly built, may well bring a kind of doth contact, for it must have been a state of doth consciousness that Moses was in to receive direct contact and formulate the potent supernal forces impacted on his higher consciousness into language and precepts to be handed down as the basic laws of the race. The resulting 10 commandments are said to correlate with the ethics of the 10 holy Sephiroth of the Kabbalah. The following is a personal analysis on the commandments as given in the authorized version of the Bible. The interpretation makes no claims to authority, but according to it, it will be seen that the listed order of the commandments also has Kabbalistic significance. So let's see how the 10 commandments line up with the 10 spheres of the Kabbalah in the opinion of the author. Are you ready, kids? Aye, aye, Captain. Oh, who lives in a pineapple under the sea? 1. Thou shalt have no other gods before me refers to the unity of Kether. 2. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image refers to the formless devotion of Hakma. Alright, so no other gods before me, Kether. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image to the formless devotion of Hakma. Where the only image is the vision of God face to face. Right. Okay. So thou shalt not have any gods before me. Thou shalt not have a graven image. Where else are we? Number 3. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain has reference to the virtue of silence in Binah, the root of faith. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor. 6 is the number of Tifereth, and the observance of the Sabbath or the seventh day has reference to the devotion to the great work and the vision of the harmony of things in Tifereth. Next, honor thy father and thy mother refers to chesed, whose virtue is obedience. Okay, thou shalt not kill obviously relates to Gibura. Next we have, thou shalt not commit adultery, although superficially it may seem to refer to the vice of Netzach, really it applies better to Yesod, the Sephirah of purification, the pure intelligence. So then he says, thou shalt not steal is an exhortation to the virtue of Netzach, unselfishness, and the firmness and valor of the Sephirah. Theft is an underhanded weakness and a sheer abuse of all principles of polarity, for theft can apply to other levels besides just the physical. Thou shalt not bear false witness relates to Hod. The qliphodic aspect of Hod is referred to as the false accuser, and in the Greek pantheon, the averse side of Hermes was considered to be a patron of thieves. And finally, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, nor anything that is thy neighbor's, refers to the vice of Malkuth, avarice. Cool beans. Nehru says, a layer of the arc happens in the pineal gland as a nuclear fusion of arcing electromagnetism called samadhi, kundalini, or merging your conscious light with the larger quantum field, higher self. So there's a physical aspect to what's also going on in the subjective. As usual, right? All right, let's keep going. 31. In this order of the Ten Commandments, we have the formulation of first Kether, Chokmah, Bina, an upward pointing triangle. You know that, right? Or even better, we'll do the diagram that's in the back of the book. All right, so he says, in this order of the Ten Commandments, we have the formulation of first Kether, Chokmah, Bina, an upward pointing triangle. Then successively Tifereth, Chesed, Gibra, and Yesod, Netzach, Hod, both downward pointing triangles. And lastly Malkuth. Reference to the glyph of the Tree of Life will show that these triangles are the same as the three triads of the Sephiroth. So he's looking at the Ten Commandments as listed in reference to how the triangles are situated, with the supernal triad pointing upward and the other two pointing downward, the ethical and the astral. Society Eject says, yep, that's the diagram I always look at when you read these books. Yeah, that might be the better one, just to kind of keep things in order. Good evening, Hikate. With regard to systems of legend and mythology other than the biblical, the ramifications are vast, for they include all deities of sea, moon, stars, and measurement. With regard to systems of legend and mythology other than the biblical, the ramifications are vast, for they include all deities of sea, moon, and stars, and measurement. Bearing in mind the magical image of Yesod, the very strong man, Hercules is an important figure, a figure indeed standing for all humanity. A figure standing for all humanity. Who does that sound like? According to the Vedic, according to the information that we've been studying, a figure standing for all humanity. the sacrificed God, the original sacrificed God, the God who so loved the world that he gave himself, Of all the gods in the heavens, there's one who was the sacrifice, and it was through his death that man was able to have life. Kind of reminds me of that one movie, I think it was Prometheus, where that alien fellow, the giant thing came down and ate that stuff and sacrificed his body in order to start life on that planet. That's actually an ancient concept. That's how we have life today. Because we all talk about, oh, God's within all of us, we're all God, etc., etc. But that's a very, 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 very ancient concept. That image behind the tree is the God that sacrificed itself to become Purusha and Prakriti and to become all of us. When you say Namaste, what you're actually saying is the God in me recognizes the God in you. Not we are individual gods out here kicking ass. No, the Purusha in me sees the Purusha in you. The Atman in me sees the Atman in you. Namaste means I'm not looking at the ego or the face that you've prettied up as a presentation. I'm seeing past that. I'm speaking to the soul. My soul speaking to your soul. Past the ego stuff, past the personal likes and dislikes. That's what Namaste is supposed to mean, right? So keep in mind, we're not talking about different gods. We're not talking about separate entities. There is one God who literally was sacrificed to become us. At least that's what the Vedic taught. That's what the Vedic tells us Purusha actually is. Not just some, infinite mind floating out in the middle of nowhere. It is also active through Prakriti. Prakriti is half of Purusha. Purusha and Prakriti, they come together, right? It's not two different gods. It is a one God, male and female. Let us make man in our image, right? This is what we're dealing with. This stuff didn't start a couple hundred years ago. It's been floating out here. MC Maestro says there was a part in Ben 10 where he sacrificed himself to save all his aliens. I wonder if that's why attachment is such a big problem, because attachment is not the nature of Purusha. Sacrifice for creation is the nature of Purusha. Lots to think about. $34. Well, no, it's still with 33. Bearing in mind the magical image of Yesod, the very strong man, Hercules is an important figure, a figure indeed standing for all humanity. The 12 labors of Hercules can be said to represent the evolutionary task of man and can be aligned with the 12 signs of the zodiac. 34. The Egyptian goddess Maat is likewise worthy of mention. She was often depicted as a woman sitting on her heels, a suggestion of the sandals of Yesod and the foundation. It was she who, usually in the form of a feather, was placed in the pan of the balance of the judgment hall of Osiris, opposite the heart of the one newly dead, to test its truthfulness. Here again, we have the accent on measure and the purity of Yesod. She was also intimately connected with Thoth, who was sometimes called the master of Maat, the master of truth and justice. Hercules, Hercules, Hercules. Nice. Society Eject says, and God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. Likeness, the fact or quality of being alike, resemblance. The very same way that Prakriti, begins to form herself into the likeness of Purusha. So not only is man made in the image, but also the world. And as we see ourselves, that's how we see the world. (35) There's also the triple aspect of the moon and the triple aspect of woman: virgin, mate, and ancient crone. These are represented in the Greek pantheon by Artemis, Selene, and Hecate. By the way, Hecate, you'll also find that Anubis is intricately linked with Hecate. They both can be seen as the same type of entity, the same entity, really. The same way that the dog is ever watchful, right? The dog stands at the door, whether it's daytime or nighttime, he is always aware and alert. We know that daytime represents the conscious mind, nighttime represents the subconscious mind. It can also represent life and death. So Anubis, being the dog, is attentive. He's on the watch. So regardless if we're talking about conscious life or subconscious life, living life or death, right? Anubis is there at the threshold, waiting and watching, just like a dog, right? Just like when you go to sleep, the dog is still aware. The dog might be asleep too, but if he hears a bump or a scratch or something, his ears perk up, heads jump up, and he's going to see what's going on. Or if you got a scary dog, he might just start barking off after any little noise. But the point I'm making here is this is the type of essence we're dealing with when you talk about Anubis or even Hecate. Of course, Hecate is going to be a slightly different flavor, slightly different, but it's the same. That's why she's surrounded by the dogs. It represents the same thing. Anubis and Hecate both walk the edge between light and death. Tree Marie, thank you. She says, just like the moon card, right? So we've also got that happening right there with those two dogs and those two pillars and the water at the bottom. I meant to go grab my tarot deck. I'm going to do it. Why not? Listen, just personally for me, the way that I know that I'm moving forward is when I can effortlessly interchange between teaching symbols. So whether it's any of these different books or the tarot cards or even a chart, I feel like having a good understanding of this information is represented by using all types of different things. But yeah, here we've got an image of standing on the brink between two worlds. I mean, look at all the different worlds. Right there with the crayfish, we've got the different worlds of land and sea. So here's an entity, right? Just like the dog, here's an entity that's able to walk in between the two states of existence. It's able to be a water creature and also a land creature. And don't forget about the mythology that we just read about with Oannes, who came up out the water, right? Came up from the bottom, now we're here. Who came out from the water, taught the people, because we're talking about the conscious plane, and then he descended back into the water, representing the subconscious plane, right? And of course, we've got the dog, like I said, ever watchful, howling at the moon, subconscious. By the way, this represents the dark side of the moon. So we're really talking about the subconscious mind, the back of the head. And look at the yods raining down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There's 15 little yods sprinkling down. I wonder what's the significance with that. Let's see, what's the 15th card? Oh, okay. You see how these clues tie together? 15. The 15th card is the devil, representing attachment, hardcore attachment to the physical plane, hardcore attachment to the manifest dimension, which is a possibility when one doesn't understand that there's actually two sides of the coin. And it isn't even necessarily a bad thing. It's just, it is what it is. So there's a lot of duality taking place on this card. Two towers, the two dogs, the two planes of existence, the traveler on this path, which is beset by two sides, right? Even though the dog is civilized, it's still a primal dog deep down inside, just like that wolf. They're both gonna howl at that moon. So no matter how civilized this dog is, it is still a dog, just like the wolf. The wolf just don't have the cultured human ego placed over it. But leave this thing out in the wild and it will start to become wild again. We're talking about your inner self, the deep aspect of your inner self. Oh snap! See, Society Ejects. I'm trying to wrap it up and make it quick. You bringing out all kinds of stuff that we've been talking about. Yeah. So just like what you said, Society Ejects. You said, and what is he doing in that devil card? He's pointing up and pointing down. Have you guys ever seen an image of somebody pointing up and pointing down? Have you ever seen an image of maybe even somebody with horns and goat legs with his chest all out, pointing up and pointing down? Have you ever seen anything like that? Somebody tell me in the chat if you've ever seen that before. I don't know why, but it seems familiar. Society Eject says, the book studies is becoming hot, lol, like water on my back when I take a shower. Right, man, because we're getting into this information for real. Like, this is actually the secret occult stuff. Not secret because it's hidden, but secret because people don't have the eyes to see it. MC Maestro says, the most famous psychopomps are of that same nature as Anubis and Hecate, crossroads. They seem to represent the lower triangle of the tree. Yes. Greetings, Alora. Alora says, love and gratitude to everyone here. Glad I made it in time for some studying. Yes, yes. Okay, so nobody can guess what I'm talking about? Well, I'll just give it away. Thank you, Natural Nature. Just before I said it, this is Baphomet, right? Baphomet, pointing up, pointing down, as above, so below. It's not about evil. We're still talking about the transmutation of force. Stop being scared of this card. Stop being scared of this card. We're talking about the transmutation of spirit into matter. Notice the fire. The fire is a symbol in the occult which represents transformation and also bearing light. So yeah, he's holding it upside down, but it's only going to burn faster. Right? So yeah, not only is it Baphomet, but we've also got this guy. We've also got this guy. As above, so below. Right? Same thing. Now, what's he got up under him? He's got his tools that he uses to direct consciousness into matter. He's got his tools, right? Well, he's got his tools too. He's got his tools too. It's called man and woman, right? Adam and Eve. So we're still dealing with the higher self. Don't be scared of this picture just because it's got devil horns. It's symbolic. And by the way, I believe it was Society Ejects who pointed out even another connection to that. Check this dude out. Check this dude out. What's he doing? What's he got going on? Do you see a similarity here? Do you see a correspondence with that? Do you see it? We're talking about the God who so loved the world that he sacrificed himself. Right? Don't be scared of none of this stuff. This is all your higher self. This is all you. Or at least what you're actually composed of. Beautiful stuff. Papa Peru. I mean, look, the clue is in his name right there. I don't know how the hell I missed it this whole time. This is an aspect of Purusha. And guess what? Every male deity has a female counterpart. By the way, here's Purusha. Every male entity has a female counterpart. And the female counterpart of what we're talking about is Shakti, Prana Shakti. So the Shakti is the power itself. It's the movement of that power itself. It's the utilization of that power itself. It is the power itself. Prana Shakti. Gosh. And see, I could hold up even more diagrams here. I could even hold up the diagram that MC Maestro likes to use out of mystical Kabbalah when we talk about the spheres, right? Right there. And see, I got this from MC Maestro. She's a representation of the tree. You got these two Sephiroth for the top two Sephiroth. You got these two for these guys right here. You got these two for these two right here. She's got the crown on, just like Kether, right? You got to know how to look at these symbols. I can read the books to you every single night. And while we all love a good bedtime story, you do your part by meditating on these symbols, by contemplating these concepts, by finding out how this stuff actually relates to you in your real life. That's what you can do. And that's how you get better. By using this data and not just simply, using it for entertainment. But yeah, look at what we're dealing with. We're all pointing to God. These are not different entities. These are all one entity. These are all one entity, and that's you. Well, that's what you actually are. You're an expression of this entity. You're a manifestation of this entity on a lower scale. It is a fractal. It's literally a fractal. All right, let's keep going, because I will literally be here all night. And I know you guys have things to do, so I am going to respect your time. Okay, so there's also the triple aspect of the moon and the triple aspect of woman, virgin, mate, and ancient crone. These are represented in the Greek pantheon by Artemis, Selene, and Hecate. Although other goddesses do have overlapping aspects, Pallas Athene, for example, would qualify as virgin of the moon in her lower aspects. Thus, references in certain old grimoires of magic to having a young virgin or a hag to assist the magician may well originally have been guarded references to certain moon symbolism and the potencies behind it. Right? You've seen certain rituals that talk about having to have a virgin or sometimes having to have an old woman. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean a person. It might have more to do with a type of potency, a type of force. From this, it will be seen that one needs an experienced magical method of mentation before dabbling with certain occult matters. For the true interpretation of much magical lore depends on analogy, allegory, and symbol rather than straightforward logic. Master key right there. He says that from this it will be seen that one needs an experienced magical method of mentation, right? A magical method of putting these things together in your head. Before, you need that before dabbling with certain occult matters. For the true interpretation of such magical lore depends on analogy, allegory, and symbol. I keep saying it's all about the relationships. It's all about the correspondences. What's your library of correspondences look like? Is your library of correspondences this thick? Is your library of correspondences this thick? Right? Imagine what you could do when you have so many more correspondences to work with. It gives you a super comprehensive and detailed library of images to work with. And you're literally beginning to unlock different rooms in this storehouse of images that we call Yesod. Because the images exist there. The images exist there, but depending on your level of depth is how deep you can go, right? We're looking at a library here. We're looking at the library of the etheric plane. But just like in government buildings or certain workplaces, you got to have a key card that gives you access to certain rooms. And depending on your rank, or rather what your purpose is or what you're doing for the whole, your key card may have access to different levels. So just because you don't have a logical awareness of a certain thing, it's in there. It's in there. You just don't have the keys to get there, which are the images. right? And with that being said, I'm going to read exactly what he just said in that line that I read twice. I'll read it for a third time. From this, it will be seen that one needs an experienced magical method of mentation before dabbling with certain occult matters, for the true interpretation of much magical lore depends on analogy, allegory, and symbol rather than straightforward logic. See, it's very difficult to just logically think your way to planetary consciousness. It's very difficult to just think your way to the archangel level. So we use allegory, we use symbols, we use metaphors. This is why this stuff is important. We use things like this to give us an idea of what we're dealing with. And I'll tell you something, this goes really deep, y'all. Like, nothing about, this is why I say the Rider-Waite deck as opposed to a cute little unicorn deck, which I also have and was given to me as a gift, and I appreciate. But I enjoy this one for magical work because even down to these colors, right? You guys keep hearing me talk about, and even what it says in the beginning of these chapters, the different colors refer to the different planes, right? So look, we're talking about Malkuth on the 4 level, the Absolute, the Briatic, the Etheric, and the Ascetic, right? So where do you think these colors come from? Somebody asked me a few months ago, Travis, what does it mean about the sky? Some skies are yellow, some are blue, some of the skies are even gray and black. What does it mean, right? Well, I'm going to tell you what it means. These colors are representations of what particular world we're dealing with, whether it's Yetzirah, Absolute, Bria, or Asaya. You feel what I'm saying? So the more that you have in your library of correspondences, the deeper you'll be able to understand what the hell you're looking at. So there's no need to make stuff up. There's no need to just make something up and try to convince other people to believe what you believe. No, just stick with the real. Stick with the real. Start looking at the connections, right? Because you're going to find that there are several connections. Do you think there's a connection between this pair? Because we just looked at a connection between the Magician card and Baphomet and this Devil card. Do you think there's a connection between this? And check out the hands now. The angel's pointing above and the 2 humans are pointing below, signifying, in this case, we all understand the assignment. So it's not all on the angel this time. Even man is doing their part. You see how they're both pointing to the ground? The serpent is in its place on the tree. I'm trying to get it to focus, but it's not focusing. The angel's got the sun behind him, right? On the devil card, we notice that his tail is on fire and her tail sprouting fruit. Look what's happening in this garden here. The tree is on fire. The tree is sprouting fruit with the serpent. This is all symbolic. None of it arbitrary. None of it pure happenstance. MC Maestro says, damn, wizards really got mistaken and kidnapped little girls for these rites. Yeah, and that's what happens when the ego is running the ship instead of understanding, right? Humans, man. Hikate says, I'm rich because of you. Library of Gold. I'm grateful to be able to assist. Will Trent says, when you related it to Hootie, to the magician, it set something off in me. Yes, sir. Do you have a public library or university library? Right. MC Maestro says those red robes are in cards 1 through 5. Yes. Again, very symbolic of the force that we're dealing with. Because remember, each of the Sephiroth have a color scale. So if you really want to know the type of power you're working with, understand the colors tell you everything. So at one level, somebody might just see the card and say, oh, look, this woman is pulling open this lion's mouth. But you got to get deep with it. You got to get deep with it. There's more symbols than just a woman pulling open the lion's mouth. Look at the expression on her face. Look at the lion. The lion is not even pissed off. He almost seems to be happy to be tamed. And I already mentioned how this card was I don't know why it's not focusing. I already mentioned how this card was a reference to Durga. That's why you see Durga riding on a lion. Of course, the color of the sky, all that other stuff. Oh, and not to mention the infinity above her head, the Ouroboros, which we also see above his head. But anyway, let's get back to Yesod. Dream Marie says, yo, the Crowley deck goes hard too. Absolutely does. Absolutely does. And see, the Crowley deck approaches these same forces, but the good thing is that, I guess if we could say mainstream, these are mainstream, the Crowley deck approaches those same forces from another angle, right? It still checks out across the board Kabbalistically. He's just pulling out different symbols. And like I said, the more that you understand the symbols and the correspondences, the deeper it goes. So it would actually be a good idea to get both if you wanted to get a real deal study on what this is all about. Oh, shit. Cool beans. Yes, so Society EJ says, Travis, the love card is Gabriel. Look at the colors on the angel's head. Yeah. So it might even be a good idea. I don't know. Maybe we can sit down and like make a list of all the different colors and go through all the cards and like pick out their attributes, you know? If I ran a magical lodge, that would be one of the homework assignments I'd have for my students. Tree Marie says, of course, Gemini, right? So this card is represented by the zodiac sign Gemini. And it's also number 6, and it also is connected to Tiferet, which is symbolizes the number 6. The Lover's card combines Binah and Tiferet. All right, so yeah, we're gonna get more into this stuff later, y'all. We're gonna get more into this stuff later. Honestly, what I would probably do is like weekly, one card at a time, until you start to be able to just pick out the rest. But anyway, that's for later. Let's finish this last verse. 36. In practice, this unfortunately works out in the fact that the scientifically minded person considers the occultist to be completely devoid of any powers of logic, of sensible reasoning. However, occultism is in reality a very exact science. It must be, or the practical operator is soon in trouble. And the training of an adept is every bit as rigorous and lengthy as an advanced graduate of one of the sciences. It is to be hoped that in the future the two methods of mind working and research will coalesce, as indeed they seem to be doing through the field of modern psychiatry and the increasing interest in symbolism and myth. So there you have it. There you have it. Today's lesson. We talked about Yesod and a whole host of other things, but it was all on the same topic, which is the Storehouse of Images. And this Storehouse of Images also perfects these forms. It perfects the images, right? Because it is through these images that we have access to the agency of the higher forces. See, we don't just interact with the higher forces as is. We literally have to have a medium. The same way it goes with the astral plane. You don't just go to the astral plane. You've got to do it through a medium, which is the etheric plane. In this case, we're talking about Yesod. So it will take a thorough understanding of Yesod to be able to constructively, consistently, and successfully work on the astral plane. For sure, you can do it on accident. For sure, you can hit it every now and then. But my key words were consistency, intentional, right? You can take a bunch of mushrooms and shoot up into the astral plane. But that doesn't mean you know what you're doing. That doesn't mean you know what you're seeing, right? That's one thing that I learned from doing mushrooms many years ago, 2004, to doing them recently. Back then, I didn't know what I was looking at. I just had video games and movies. But now, with a library of correspondences and images, I understood what I was perceiving. I understood what I was experiencing. Or at least I'll say I had a better level of understanding, a depth of understanding, because understanding is infinite. My makeup isn't designed to understand everything, not in this form. But my awareness is expanding. My capacity to understand is expanding. And eventually I will be able to hold more. And you will too. This is growth. This is growth. And this is why the word education comes from the word educo, to educe, right? And educe is basically saying pulling out of, right? To educe is to pull out from within. So how can true education be pulling out from within if you don't have anything in there in the first place? Well, that's the thing. Nobody said we're pulling it out of the memory. No one said we're pulling it out of the ego. We're pulling it out of something deeper. Because whether you have a body or not, this is your core. This is your center, right? And your center is now wrapped around layer after layer after layer. And with every layer that your center is wrapped around, right? With every layer, that adds to what type of memory, what type of data is present. But it's getting buried now, right? By the time we reach collective unconscious, we've already buried the planetary consciousness, the angelic, the archangelic, the God level. We've buried that under layers already. So it's no wonder that we can't remember it or conceive it all the way up here, right? When we make it to the human race level and we get wrapped up inside of a race, then we get wrapped up inside of a certain family, right? So this vast information is now being slimmed down and trimmed down and perfected, as is said here in Yesod, right? Let's go back to the beginning of Yesod and see what he says exactly. Talk about Yesod, he says the ninth path is called the pure intelligence because it purifies the emanations. It proves and corrects the designing of their representations and disposes the unity with which they are designed without diminution or division. So that's what's happening here. You're becoming wrapped in layer after layer after layer. And in truth, we're talking about the pure force of undifferentiated consciousness coming down the tree, down until it hits here and it's finally dispersed as what it's been wrapped up to be. In this case, you as an individual, or a rock, or a snake, or a spider, or a cup of water. So it's being wrapped into childhood memories, it's being wrapped into who you were yesterday, and here you're presented with this very moment right now. So when we say educe and educate, we're going deep into these layers and pulling out what already exists. All the data of reality exists at this lower level. The foundation of memory, it's built on top of that. So when you go into meditation, when you sit in stillness and you reflect, this is how you start to go deeper into these levels and actually educate yourself. This is how you actually gain an education. When you're presented with a symbol like this, when you're presented with a symbol like that, when these symbols are presented to you, they serve as life rafts, anchors, or boats that you're able to travel with into the depths of the collective unconscious and beyond. So you see what I mean? Like, you can't skip the etheric plane to get to the astral because you require some type of transportation device. You don't just jump into it. Oh, I astral projected. Oh, I pulled this from the astral, the ethers. There's structure to it. There has always been structure to it. Like, I didn't make this up. Matter of fact, I was doing some more research on this that I received from my meditation, this list, and I see that Carl Jung has come up with the exact same thing. Carl Jung has already touched on this. And then I saw another person, another much older and wiser author, come up with something very similar. So it's nothing that I made up. This is what you see when you get there. This is what you see when you get there. Oh boy. So hopefully you're seeing the connections. Hopefully this is becoming more and more familiar with you. Hopefully you're starting to get it, if you don't get it already. And if you do get it, hopefully you're getting it even deeper, because it's endless. It really is. There's stuff beyond this, and every single day we're creating a new layer. But as they say, don't forget, no matter how far you go, don't forget where you came from. You feel me? You feel me? So I wish you great understandings and clarity and love. Don't forget, real dads read. I got that bookmark hanging out with my son. There was this program they had for fathers. I thought that bookmark was pretty cool, so I kept it. Symbols everywhere, symbols everywhere. Society Eject says, I definitely appreciate all the time and information you give us, Travis. My gratitude for night. Thank you so much. Love you, my friend. Love you too, bro. Thank you for being here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could just make this stuff, but what's the point if no one's going to receive it, right? So yeah, like I said, I appreciate you guys as well. Not for any specific thing that you do for me, because like, you know what? It's not about that. Gratitude is looking past what a person or what a thing does or what it looks like. You know, anybody can be grateful for beauty. Anybody can be grateful for money, but look beyond it, right? Be grateful for the divine existence that even makes a way for these things to be, right? Anyways, I'm grateful for you for being here, right? You don't have to do anything. The fact that you're here says enough. We're all connected at a certain level, and we all recognize that intrinsically. Why else would you spend, my timer even messed up, I don't even know how many hours we've been on here. Why else would you spend all this time here if there wasn't something familiar, something that felt like home, right? Something in this information you literally resonate with. So yeah, I'm happy to be a part of this. I'm grateful to be a part of this, and grateful that you guys are gaining insight. You know, you can take some of this and go do your own research. This is massive. Like it's getting past me at this point. I can't figure all this shit out. I'm gonna start needing some help very soon. If I thought it was lonely before as far as people knowing what the hell I was talking about, it's about to get even more so, because man, stuff gets deep. Okay, so look, I'm about to close it out, but first I'm gonna open up this book that I received. What is it? I don't know, because I completely forgot. But I forgot how awesome it was to do unboxings. So let's go ahead and do that. Woohoo, got a package. I wonder what's inside. Uh-oh, Penthouse magazine. Just kidding. Ooh. What do you think it is? Is it an NLP book? Is it a yoga book? Is it a metaphysics book? Is it the user's guide to how to do OnlyFans and make lots of money? Let's find out. So this is called Inner Space by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. And you know who recommended this to me? Sunshine Chick. Sunshine Chick recommended this to me because it connects a lot of, pretty much it connects the Bible and Kabbalah, the Bible verses and how they relate to Kabbalah. Cool beans. Yeah, so thank you, Sunshine Chick, for recommending this. This should be interesting. Cool. And it's not too thick. So we'll see. Maybe this could be something we could do on a book study. Who knows? Who knows? But if you can find this, go ahead. At least based on what Sunshine Chick told me about it. Like I said, I haven't read it yet, but she shared with me some pretty cool stuff. So, hell yeah, we're getting advanced. You know it's advanced when the author is a rabbi. Okay. All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. So that's a wrap. I'll be seeing you guys next time. Enjoy yourselves. Be good to yourself. Don't talk shit about yourself or anyone else, really. Because all of us are aspects of the one God. The Vedics called it Purusha. Purusha sacrificed itself so that it may know itself. From one entity, it's fractured and split into trillions and billions, uncountable manifestations. That's the same figure you see on the cover of Mystical Kabbalah. The Tree of Life is his feminine aspect, Prakriti, clothing him, wrapping him like an egg so that he may experience himself. And then when he's done, he'll transcend that level. Tree Marie says, fix that squeaky door with a bunch of exclamation points. Don't come up in my book study and tell me to fix my door. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, good stuff. I love it. I love it. Life is good. Life is good. Life is great. I appreciate you guys once again. Thank you for being here. Have a great night. I hope that this resonates with you and you learned something. Until next time. Hopefully tomorrow. Until next time. Enjoy yourselves. Be good to yourselves. Non-attachment. Stop, stop getting yourself all worked up and anxious and paranoid and all that stuff. Let it go. Like I said, we consider God an it. We're an it to God. We're the it. God is eternal. We're temporary. We're the it. We're the creations. So trust and believe that this higher entity, this higher aspect, knows and understands. You're not just out here lost and confused and shit. There's a part of you that understands what the hell's going on and knows where you're headed and is excited to get you there. Well, technically, it doesn't have any feelings, but for the most part, it's going to manifest the best possible reality for itself. So trust that. And if you need some help, maybe you should create an image that can serve as a connecting point between you and it, or you and Most High, whatever you want to call it. That's what religion is about, isn't it? We use a symbol of Christ to connect, right? We use the image of our chakras to connect to our etheric body, to connect to our body of light. Isn't that what we're doing in the first place? But just understand, even if you didn't connect yet and you don't know, at least now you know. You're not out here alone. You're here all one. So this is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. I love you. Not from no ego place, but from a deeper place of understanding what you actually are and what I am too. Peace.